The wind knifed across the wall in long, ragged strokes, its keen edge scraping wet stone and frigid timber, raising a keening that slipped beneath every door in Castle Black and settled in the bones of the men huddling within. The dawn beyond the ramparts was colorless, a wan haze somewhere between slate and ash, and yet the horn still barked its summons. Once, twice, thrice, brothers spilled from barracks and storerooms, stamping numb feet, drawing wool cloaks tight, muttering where yesterday they might have jested. Laughter had thinned with the daylight, thinned with the threat crowding every horizon. Jon Snow felt it most of all in Ghost's restlessness. The direwolf's hackles stood bristling each dawn now, his red eyes fixed northward as though he smelled the wrongness on the wind. Twice a raven had arrived from Eastwatch, reporting dead fishing villages along the shivering sea. Bodies stiff in doorways, the snow around them disturbed only by pale animal tracks that led nowhere. Jon tried to speak of it at the evening meal, but Bowen Marsh waved a weary hand. Eastwatch has ever been prey to raiders and squalls, the Lord Steward insisted. Let them mend their own nets. Yet Jon saw the unease in Marsh's downturned gaze, the way he rubbed thumb and first finger together as though counting debts he had not the coin to settle. The old bear should have returned by now. Jeor Mormont's ranging beyond the fist had left Castle Black leaderless, and 7 moons had passed since the last raven claimed him still alive. Some whispered he was dead. Others, that what had been buried beneath the snow had followed him home. Neither rumor brought much comfort. Without a Lord Commander, every brother tugged the watch in his own direction, and that ragged division was itself a wound beginning to fester. Samwell Tarly arrived on the steps outside the armory, his cheeks already flushed raw, wool gloves darkening where he worried the knuckles. Another body, he told Jon, voice hoarse, near the cage by the old cold forge. One of the new boys from Mole's Town. Jon swore under his breath. The recruit had been barely 15, quick to grin and far quicker to shiver. Only 2 nights ago Jon had lent the boy a thicker cloak. Blue lips? He asked, though he knew the answer. Sam nodded. And the eyes? He swallowed hard, as if naming it might conjure the frost-burned corpse. They were wrong. Jon clasped Sam's shoulder. See him tended. Keep him in the ice cells until Maester Eamon advises otherwise. But the cells are full. Sam's voice splintered like old pine. For dead just this week, Jon, and the crows keep coming with Mormont's silence. The men look to you. They should look to themselves, Jon answered, though the protest tasted weak. He had led rangers before, yes, but he was still scarcely 19, and ghosts of oathbreakers still whispered his bastard name in the darkest hours. On the east parapet, the advance party returning from the Shadow Tower filed through the gate. 50 had ridden out in search of the old bear. 34 limped back, horses with ribs jutting beneath dull coats. Men with bandaged arms, frost-split cheeks, haunted eyes. And with them came one shape none expected to see on the wall. Craster. He rode a shaggy Garen, his ruined teeth displayed in a yellow grin, fur cloak stiff with grease and something darker. Behind him plodded 6 sledges burdened by women. His wives, his daughters, both. The youngest clutched thin blankets, eyes wide, while the oldest glared at the brothers with a defiance that might well be older than the watch itself. The courtyard fell near silent save for the whimper of hungry dogs. Even the wind seemed to pause, baffled that such a man stood upon stones never meant for his kind. It was Molly who found his voice first. 7 hells, he muttered, hitching his spear beneath one arm. What's that misbegotten wildling doing here? Breathing, Dolorous Ed supplied, leaning on his pike. A thing no right-thinking corpse ought. Ser Dennis Mallister dismounted and strode to Jon, his long face pinched. We found him on the Millquarter's banks, the old knight intoned. Said his hall is ashes. Said the white shadows came howling, and the only payment they honored was the one he'd always given. A murmur ran through the gathered brothers, like dry leaves chasing an ill wind. They all knew which payment Mallister meant. Craster swung from his Garen, boots crunching cinders of old grit. Told that fool Mormont the truth, didn't I? His small eyes glistened like black ice. Told him the cold gods wake hungry. Now they've drank near all the wildlings south of Frostfangs, and the big man with the horns is marching the rest to your doorstep. But do you lot share your fires? Do you kiss the snow with the same gift I do? A laugh burbled in his throat, half choke, half crow's caw.
No.
You clutch your swords and pray to trees and foreign gods, and the white ones will eat you last, mayhaps. But eat you they will. John stepped forward. The Watch is not in the habit of hosting men who take their own daughters to wife. Craster spat, a rope of phlegm striking the ice. Nor are you in the habit of surviving what comes. A man pays what he can, boy. I got coin aplenty. His leer settled on the sledges, on the shapes bundled there. One of the wives, Gilly, held something swaddled close, something that mewled as the wind changed. She kept her gaze locked on the ground. Bowen Marsh appeared then, cloak fluttering like oversized wings. Enough! He raised both hands for silence. The courtyard stilled in uneasy obedience. The Watch is master of its own, and its own alone. Yet the tales this man carries are not lightly dismissed. If the wildling army under Raider truly musters at our door, if these others march beside them, we stand in peril more dire than any siege since the long night. Owen the oaf coughed. Peril won't be cowed by incestuous old goats. I, called another voice from the back. String him up. But for every shout of contempt, two faces wrestled doubt. For weeks now, brothers found stiff and strange had risen in the night only to be hacked apart once more. Lanterns guttered without wind. Cooks swore ice crawled in the bread ovens, and still no raven bore word of Gior Mormont. Faith was fraying faster than the rope binding a single watchtower door. Bowen motioned broadly. Craster claims knowledge of how to appease the others. He has parleyed with them in his way, foul though it be. Such knowledge, fell as it sounds, may prove the only fire to hold the night at bay. Dolorous Ed shuffled closer to Gren and whispered loud enough for those near to hear. I chew gravel before I kneel to that goat, but gravel's scarce at Castle Black, and kneeling's always been free. The talk spilled through the castle like sour ale from a cracked barrel. For 2 days men argued in mess halls, atop ramparts, beside the fire pits that no longer seemed hot enough. On the third dawn after Craster's arrival, Bowen marshaled every living brother in the old sept beneath the wall's looming shadow. A cavernous hall whose roof had collapsed decades earlier, its pitted stone pews open to drifting snow and the constellations above. Torches ringed the broken sept, fretful flames bowing when the wind sighed through jagged timbers overhead. 300 brothers formed a rough crescent facing an empty plinth where once a statue of the Seven had stood. The gods had been carted south for tinder in a winter long forgotten, but the plinth remained, a mute witness awaiting new idols. Bowen Marsh raised a black-gleamed horn cup. Brothers, his voice cracked, but he pushed on. By right of senior stewardship and in absence of the Lord Commander, I call for a choosing. A hush fell, the silence so taut it threatened to snap. We cannot wait on ravens that do not fly. We cannot wait on commanders who do not return. We must choose now, and choose with the wall's survival in mind. Sir Dennis Mallister inclined his white head. The commander must be of the Watch. I, rumbled Cotter Pike from the back, arms folded across his barrel chest, and the Watch, last I counted, bears no incest-bred wildlings among its oaths. Craster shuffled forth, followed by wives swaddled in rags. His chuckle rasped like iron filings in a jar. Man's oaths break easy when his blood ices in the vein. He spread arms thick with wiry hair. I offer what you cannot forge, beg nor steal, the cold god's mercy. The word mercy struck the brothers like a slap. Mercy was scarce as fresh bread these nights, and twice as dear. John's fist tightened on Longclaw's pommel. He had opposed this folly from the moment it crawled into torchlight, but now, seeing so many eyes dip toward Craster, he understood the depth of fear hollowing their bellies. Fear was a pit, and men in pits forgot to look for ladders. They only clawed the nearest wall. I cast my vote, Bowen declared, for Craster. A ripple traveled the pews. Shock, disgust, tentative relief. All at once, Ser Dennis's mouth tightened with nightly disdain, but his pale eyes flicked northward, toward the darkness pooled beyond the wall. Whether he saw rising terrors there or merely the breadth of unknown night, he raised his hand next. I second. From the shadows, a third hand rose, then a fourth. When Cotter Pike slammed his fist on the pew and growled, "Bloody fools!" the Count stood near half. John's heart hammered. In the wildling villages, he had seen mothers hold stillborn babes they would not name for fear the cold would steal them. He had seen bones dressed in ice and flayed of memory, and he had seen Craster smiling. He glimpsed Sam across the stone aisle, round shoulders shaking. Sam would never stand for this, yet Sam's hand had not lifted either. Cowed, ashamed, he stared at his own boots and trembled. John inhaled winter, tasting wood smoke and salt and something coppery beneath. Slowly, deliberately, he placed his palm on the hilt of Long Claw and lowered it beside his thigh. Then he lifted his hand, fingers splayed in acceptance of the vote. A murmur crested. Somewhere a brother sobbed. Many who followed did so because Jon Snow had raised his hand, not Craster, and Jon felt the weight of their desperation settle on his shoulders like fresh snow. By the time the tally ended, Craster's majority stood undeniable. Bowen Marsh cleared his throat, voice thin. Then, by the ancient right of the watch, I name Craster Lord Commander for the duration of this long night, to hold until death or dismissal by 2/3 vote. Craster stepped upon the empty plinth. His breath smoked in the torchlight, curling about his head like a serpent's ghost. "Kneel," he commanded, and hundreds of men. Poachers, sons of lords, rapers, thieves, bastards, sank to one knee before him, steel helms lowered. Snow drifted through the shattered roof onto bent backs and black cloaks, as though the sky itself sought to shroud the shame of this hour. He surveyed them with a conqueror's grin. First order, the babes. A hush, brittle as river ice, crept between the rows. Any whelp birthed within these walls, be it sowed by crow or whore or my own seed, will be offered at the godwood's root. The white ones hunger most for flesh unspoiled. Jon surged to his feet, but hands found his shoulders, Gren's rough grip, PYP's wiry arms. The brothers held him, faces sick with dread. Craster continued, savoring each syllable. Second, the wall shall not bar the wildling host. Let them pass south, for the others care not whence meat comes. He spat. Open the gate when raiders' fools arrive. Their bones will keep the gods sated longer than yours. Bowen Marsh paled, but he nodded like a puppet whose strings had iced. Fear, Jon thought again. Fear is the pit, and we have buried ourselves alive. That night, Jon stood atop the wall, Ghost pacing restlessly beside him. Beyond the white expanse, the haunted forest stirred. A sea of black boughs beneath a bruised sky. Somewhere in that darkness, Craster's silent patrons gathered their ranks, bone fingers drumming on blades of frost. Jon felt their gaze like a nail between his shoulder blades, pressing him southward toward a future no longer his own. Below, in the courtyard, torches traced uneasy paths as brothers dragged timbers to the gatehouse, preparing to raise the iron grill at dawn. Others dug shallow trenches near the heart tree, muttering prayers no septon would sanction. The first sacrifice would come with sunrise. Sam joined Jon atop the ice, breath-catching. "We could still refuse," he whispered, as though the wind might tattle. "We could ride tonight, warn the kingdoms, and break our oaths?" Jon's voice was a rasp. "Who would heed us? They will think us deserters drunk on wildling lies." Sam's round face crumpled. "Then what is left?" "Fire," Jon answered, staring at the horizon where false dawn bled a thin silver line. "And steel, and a memory of honor buried beneath both." Ghost's low growl rolled across the frost. Far below, somewhere in the arching vaults beneath Castle Black, a newborn cried. The sound carried up through the ice, fragile as birdsong, before the wind devoured it utterly. Hours later, Craster convened his first council within the storeroom nearest the kitchens. a broad chamber whose walls sweated cold and whose corners held spiderwebs thick as ropes. He lounged in Mormont's carved oak chair, feet planted wide on the table, sour ale slopping from a dented mug. His wives flitted at the margins, stacking clay jars of grease-soaked rags, their faces empty as broken masks. John, Bowen Marsh, Ser Dennis, Cotter Pike, and half a dozen stewards formed a semicircle before him, each forced by courtesy or fear to sip the bitter brew he provided. Craster spoke of sacrifices in the same tone fishermen used when haggling for nets, of the wildling host's approach as a herdsman might discuss weather, of white shadows that walked between trees wearing crowns of moonlight. All the while he scratched at lice in his beard and belched loudly. Pike spat ale onto the rushes. "You speak like a man who commands the dead themselves. Are these cold kings your pets, then?" Craster's smile glistened with rot. "They are no man's pets, but they know my odor and they know my gifts. And when a man gives enough, the gods seldom take what's dear to him."
Von sdalovet bile.
"The gods you appease are not gods at all. They are monsters." "What's a monster, boy?" "A wolf that eats a sheep." Craster leaned forward, voice oil-slick and thick. "Or a sheep that prays for the wolf to starve, though he knows the winter's long?" The chair groaned beneath his shifting weight. "I'll need scouts posted at the weirwood to watch for my lords. When they come, you'll bring the babes quick. Else the gods fetch payment in their own time, and they ain't gentle collectors." Bowen's hands trembled as they clasped. "We will see it done." John's eyes snapped to the steward. "You cannot mean to." Bowen's gaze slid away. "I will do what is required to keep this garrison alive." John heard Ned Stark's voice within the vault of his skull. "The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword." He wondered if Bowen Marsh would wield the blade when Craster's gods came to claim a crying infant. Somehow he doubted it. Word spread down the wall like wildfire in dry pine. In the mess hall that night, the air hummed with rumors that Lord Commander Craster had bargained safe passage for all brothers who obeyed, that the first child to be given was already chosen. Some said an orphaned girl from Molestown, others whispered of the barmaid who had taken seed from a ranger the winter prior. Gren sat beside John at a splintered trestle, poking at gray stew. "If they take babes, maybe they'll leave us be," he said, though his eyes were wet. "Better a few innocent than all of us." John stared at the thin broth until his reflection blurred. "If we surrender innocence to death, we are already dead. We only walk until we remember it." PYP leaned in, lowering his voice. "There are mutterings in the Shadow Tower garrison. Pike's men never took to this. If you speak against Craster, they will follow. And be called traitors. Better traitors than butchers." John shook his head. "It cannot start with me." His shoulders sagged beneath invisible stone. "The watch chose PYP, with my hand among theirs." The first sacrifice arrived at dusk 3 days later. Snow fell thick and wet, blanketing Castle Black in hush even the ravens dared not disturb. Brothers lined the yard, torches guttering as damp flakes hissed upon the flames. At the heart tree, its bark bleeding crimson tears, a makeshift cradle of pine boughs had been fashioned. Gilly placed her newborn son within, tears freezing on her cheeks. John watched from a parapet, palms raw where he gripped the stone. Craster presided in a threadbare bearskin, chanting guttural sounds that scraped the cold. When the child's cries grew frantic, several brothers flinched. None stepped forward. Then the wind shifted. Something stirred beyond the gateless arch where the King's Road began its long southward descent. A shape emerged, tall, lean, armored in rime, eyes burning a glacial blue. Another followed, and then a third. The yard exhaled fear as one. The others crossed snow without leaving prints. They ignored men and torches alike, drawing to the heart tree's root. The foremost figure bent, lifted the newborn with hands of pallid crystal, and held him aloft. The child's wails ceased as frost crept across his skin, whitening lips, lashes, nails. A single breath left the tiny lungs and plumed into night, then silence. When the others withdrew, carrying their prize, the torches seemed suddenly brighter, the breath of every witness louder. But the yard felt hollower too, as though some vital cord had been snipped. Craster turned, grinning. The gods are fed. Rest easy, crows. John could not rest, not that night nor the next. He dreamt of eyes like winter stars, of swords that sang a shrill death song, of snowflakes drifting over a wall toppled and half-buried in its own rubble. In every dream, Craster watched him from a throne of skulls, rocking a child wrapped in black. Weeks passed. More babes vanished into the night. Wildling scouts arrived at the gate, half-starved men in doeskin, begging passage south. Craster welcomed them with greasy smiles, promised safe road, bade them camp in the shadow of the wall where the gods might find them appetizing. Some brothers deserted, fleeing into the dark beyond Mole's town. Others knelt more deeply, seeking favor. Yet there were those who met in secret, in unused cellars, in abandoned towers whose stairwells cracked underfoot, whispering of mutiny. John attended one such gathering beneath the old rookery. Sam had summoned him with a single scratched rune beneath his door. When John arrived, he found Gren, PYP, Ser Dennis Mallister, Dolorous Ed, and half a dozen rangers from the Shadow Tower. Candles guttered in a circle, their small flames warring with drafts. Ser Dennis spoke first. The oaths we swore were to defend the realms of men, not feed them to darkness. Cotter Pike leaned on a barrel, face streaked with soot from the forges. Bowen won't back us. He's too deep in Craster's pocket. John studied the circle of weary faces. What is your plan? Kill him, Gren said simply. His broad fingers tightened on the haft of a warhammer. Cut the head from the goat and mount it on the gate. Sam flinched but nodded. Once the watch sees him dead, perhaps sanity will return. We can close the gates, refuse further sacrifice.
See.
John frowned. And the others? They have tasted tribute. When it stops, they will roar. Ser Dennis's white beard trembled. Then let them come. Better to die fighting than kneeling. Silence weighed upon them. In the distance, a baby cried. Perhaps merely a child in the women's barracks, but the sound drove a spike through John's chest. He drew Longclaw halfway from its sheath, Valyrian steel catching candlelight. When? Tomorrow night, PYP whispered. During the feast. Craster had declared a feast to mark the full moon, another gesture of appeasement, though whether toward his cold gods or his own vanity none could say. Pig and mutton roasted on great iron spits, fat hissing onto coals that neither melted the snow nor lifted the gloom. Barrels of ale and sour wine were cracked open, and brothers gorged themselves with desperate fervor, as if the taste of grease and spice might bury the memory of screaming infants. Torches flared in the vaulting of the old dining hall, painting the rafters amber. Craster sat atop Mormont's carved seat at the dais, chewing a goose leg, thick blood gleaming on his beard. Around him clustered Bowen Marsh and a knot of sycophants, men who smiled too quickly and laughed too loud. John stood with Gren and PYP midway down the hall. His eyes kept straying to the dais, to the knife slack in Craster's belt. Valyrian steel was one thing, surprise another. They had only surprise. A hush rippled through the benches when Gilly entered, head bowed, carrying a small burlap bundle. Craster beckoned her near the dais, patted his knee. She paused, trembling, then placed the bundle in his lap. A babe, another son. The gathered men stiffened. Craster lifted the child, presented him to the hall. Behold my newest gift. He grinned. A fine, strong boy should fetch fine favor. The watch looked away, spoons frozen in midair. John could bear it no longer. He stepped forward into the aisle. Enough! The word cracked like a helm beneath a warhammer. Heads turned. Craster's grin faltered. John advanced, Longclaw unsheathed. The Night's Watch defends the realm of men. You are no brother. You are a butcher of babes and a slave of shadows. I name you Oathbreaker and enemy, and sentence you to die. Craster barked laughter that echoed off the beams. A bastard boy playing at Lord. Lay down that pretty steel, pup, before you stick your own foot. But Gren had surged up the opposite aisle, and Ser Dennis rose from the benches nearest the dais, blade drawn. Cotter Pike and 3 Shadow Tower men leapt the tables with axes. Chaos erupted. Bowen Marsh shrieked, scrambling behind the dais. Craster flung the babe to a squalling wife and yanked free his knife. He was quick despite the girth, slashing at Pike, catching the first ranger across the cheek. Blood spattered a roast pig. John closed the gap, Longclaw singing. Craster parried with bone-handled steel, spark spitting. The hall thundered with crashing benches and panicked shouts. Someone upturned a lantern. Oil fountained, flames licking straw rushes. Smoke poured toward the rafters as men grappled in orange gloom. Craster fought like a boar at bay, hacking, spitting, cursing mothers long dead. But age and ale had blunted the edge where hunger once burned. John's next stroke opened the bearskin cloak. The one after carved a bloody ribbon across Craster's forearm. An arrow hissed from the benches. Ser Dennis's work tore into Craster's thigh. The wildling staggered, bellowing. John drove Longclaw through his gut, up beneath the ribs. Craster's breath left him in a red froth. He sagged, knife clattering to stone, eyes bulging with disbelief. "Tell your gods," John whispered. "The realm remembers." He wrenched the sword free. Craster crumpled, blood spilling black upon the rushes. For a heartbeat, the hall froze, united by the sight of the fallen tyrant. Then the smoke thickened. Flames jumped to the dais banner. Brothers shouted to douse the fire. Somewhere a woman screamed. Bowen Marsh emerged, face ashen. He looked at John, at the corpse, at the babe abandoned on the floor, tiny arms flailing, and his jaw worked in horror. "You have doomed us," Bowen rasped. "The gods will come. They come regardless." John's chest heaved. Sweat and smoke stung his eyes. "But we will meet them men, not cattle." Later, beneath a night swollen with stars, John and Sam carried Craster's corpse beyond the north gate. Ghost padded ahead, tail low, ears pricked. They laid the body at the base of the wall, beneath icicles tall as lances. John thrust a torch into the rent abdomen. The flames took slowly, feeding on fat. Sam's voice shook. "If the others come for vengeance." "They will," John said. "Or they will come for the last babe." "What then?" "Then we fight." He watched the flames crawl across coarse hair, listened to fat pop and sizzle in the cold. Beyond, the haunted forest watched in silence. John imagined blue eyes staring from the tree-lean, measuring, deciding. The wind carried a sound, half ice cracking, half distant shriek. Sam clutched his cloak tighter. John kept vigil until Craster's body was blackened bone. No gods arrived, only ravens wheeling overhead, drawn to the scent. When dawn's first pallor bled into the east, he turned back to the wall, Ghost pacing at his heel. The battle, he knew, had only begun. But where fear once made a pit inside him, now something hot filled the gap, something forged of grief and rage and a bastard's stubborn will. The realm might yet burn, the wall might yet fall. But before it did, the Night's Watch would remember whose blood swore the oath, and why. The hearths in Castle Black burned sullen and low, each fire brimmed with blackened coal and little hope, a sluggish red glow that could not keep the endless wind from prowling the corridors. Smoke lingered beneath the ceilings like a brooding spirit, too weary to rise. Jon Snow felt every ember's exhaustion in his own marrow as he strode the dim passage toward the Shadow Tower bunkroom, Ghost padding silent at his heel. Behind splintered doors men muttered in strained voices. The very timbers seemed to echo with recrimination that no oath could still. Craster was gone. Carcass charred to bone in the snowfields, but his shadow still sprawled across every flagstone. They buried the newborn at dawn, Sam reading words from an old copy of Septon Barth that crumbled as he turned each page. The infant lay swaddled in rough spun and dragonglass shards because, Maester Eamon explained in brittle tones, no living babe should rest unarmed in this land of snow and specters. The shards glimmered faintly as frost gathered on the tiny lips, and Jon could scarce breathe for the weight of his own guilt, remembering the screams beneath the heart tree and the shimmer of icy mail. He tried to bury memory with the child, yet memory clung like hoarfrost to the soul. By midday Bowen Marsh had roused what brothers he still commanded to haul charred beams from the ruined hall. They worked in silence, broken only by the clack of axes and the brittle crunch as blackened timber splintered. Marsh avoided John's gaze, but not his voice. He ordered new barricades at the gate, double watches on the outer ramparts, every order couched in the language of necessity yet laced with censure. John heard that censure in every snap sentence. "You have doomed us." The words followed him more faithfully than ghost. The second night after Craster's burning, the wind fell utterly still, and an impossible hush descended on Castle Black as though all the world paused to draw one long, glassy breath. Fires guttered lower, sputtering as if deprived of air, and torches tipped pale tongues that burned blue around the edges. Brothers gathered in common rooms, arms crossed against a chill no cloak would banish. Somewhere beneath their boots a distant crack resounded, a sound like river ice shearing away from its banks, and the silence rushed back twice as deep, twice as suffocating. Ghost raised his snout and whined. John placed a hand on the direwolf's neck and felt muscles trembling beneath the fur. A horn blast shattered the hush. One cry, then another, then a third sharp, panicked bursts that bled across the yard. John was already running, sword belt rattling, when the fourth blast sounded. No watch code held a fourth. The shrill note was raw terror, nothing more. Men boiled from doorways, half-armored, fumbling with laces and buckles as they lunged toward the gate tower or the wall's broad stair. Snow filled the air, though the wind still lay stunned. Flakes drifted straight downward like ashes from some higher pyre. Through the swirling white John glimpsed torches wavering along the rampart crest, heard shouts that carried more fear than words. He took the ice stair 3 at a time, Ghost bounding ahead. At the top a line of bowmen notched arrows by torch glow, hands shaking. Dolorous Ed stood among them, face the color of candle grease. Ed gestured north across the blank expanse. "Don't ask me what I see, Snow. Ask the gods why they invented nights without moons." John cupped a hand to shade his eyes. The forest below, usually a ragged sea of jagged darkness, stood weirdly bright, each branch limned in colorless light. Between the trees drifted pale motes, soft as dandelion fluff. They rose and fell and rose again, countless faint lanterns bobbing on an unseen tide. As his pupils widened, John understood. Not lanterns, but ice crystals, each reflecting some hidden glow. Something moved among those crystals. Tall forms, taller than men, gliding soundless through drifts that swallowed mortal knees. They must have numbered 50, maybe more, each shape weaving around thin black trunks like dancers in a silent blue masquerade. One shape halted, lifted what might be an arm, and every mote within bowshot blazed brighter. A slender beam of chill radiance lanced toward the wall, striking a crenel 4 feet from John. Stone screamed, a high note that made his teeth ache, as rhyme spread spider-quick across the granite. A ranger cried out when frost climbed his bow, freezing the string in mid-draw, and the bow erupted in shards. John dropped flat behind a merlin, rolling to shield his face as 2 more spears of cold light smashed into the parapet, bursting stone. When he rose, chunks of ice skittered across his boots. Ghost snarled beside him, lips peeled off fangs. "Dragonglass!" John roared. Archers load dragonglass, but few brothers owned arrowheads chipped from obsidian, and fewer still had them notched. PYP scrambled forward, clutching a half-dozen shafts fletched in red, thrusting them at nearby archers. Their hands moved too slow, numb both to fear and to real ice. Cotter Pike burst from the tower doorway, helm askew, beard rhymed. "They're too close," he bellowed. "Ready barrels." His men heaved casks of lamp oil toward the winch crane that dangled over the wall's edge. Flames might break spirits where steel could not. Another beam stabbed upward, striking the crane itself. Iron squealed as frost swallowed the pulley. The cask tipped, oil spilling in clots that froze before they fell 10 feet. The cable snapped and whipped back, flinging the frozen barrel across the parapet. It shattered at PYP's feet, dousing boots and leggings in congealed amber. PYP hopped back with a strangled yelp. Ed cursed under his breath. "We'll need hotter prayers, lads." John glanced down the switchback stair. A score of brothers swarmed upward bearing clay jars of wildfire scavenged from Maester Eamon's forgotten stores, green oozing past wax-sealed stoppers. Their faces glowed eerie in the jar's sickly light. John felt a surge of hope and dread in equal measure. Wildfire did not discriminate. He reached back to accept 2 jars, tucking one beneath each arm like monstrous eggs. Sam appeared at his side, cheeks pale, clutching a leather satchel of dragonglass arrowheads. "You can't throw that yourself," Sam stammered. "If it breaks before you." "I won't miss," John said. He felt strangely calm, heart slowed by the awful clarity that death bestows a moment before its touch. Ghost bounded away, tail stiff, as if to circle back for the perfect strike. John ducked low, sprinted 3 paces, then rose behind a crenel. One of the tall shapes turned its faceted gaze upward. The moat light around it pulsed. Frost crept along the wall anew. He hurled the first jar in a high arc. The glass seemed to float, a shimmering green orb against the black. It struck snow amid 3 others and burst like a rotten melon. For half a heartbeat nothing happened. Then emerald flame roared sky-high, devouring snow, bark, flesh, air. The sound was not a crack but a drawn-out wail, as if the night itself died screaming. Shapes within the blaze writhed, tall limbs flailing, bodies sagging as crystal armor sloughed in molten gouts. Light poured across the grove in ghastly waves, casting the entire battlefield in nightmare emerald. John's second jar followed, landing amid a knot of wights that shambled behind their masters. Their dead flesh ignited with greedy ease, cadavers thrashed, smearing fire across neighbors. A stench of burned horsehair and thawed corruption rolled up the wall like a filthy tide. Some brothers gagged, others cheered, wild and ragged. But the reprieve was brief. 2 remaining others turned their radiant eyes on the wildfire and swept long arms in unison. Snow lifted in a swirl, smothering flame as if unseen bellows blew frost from the heart of winter itself. The green fires sputtered, shrinking beneath blankets of ice until they guttered out with sullen pops. Twisted corpses collapsed in steaming heaps, their brief light gone. John felt his calm crack. Beside him Sam fumbled with an arrow, dropping it before managing to knock another to his bow. The shaft trembled on the string. "Hold," John whispered. "Wait until..." A horn blast cut him off, this one from the yard below. 2 notes, then 3, then 2 again. Commands for cavalry that Castle Black no longer possessed. The sound devolved into shrieks of warning. John stole a glance over the inner parapet and felt his stomach hollow. From the south, a serried line of torches advanced toward the gate. Wildlings. Hundreds, maybe more. Their flames scattered sparks like locusts across the snow. Between hammer and anvil, John thought, "Gods help us." The gate was half unbarred, crews stripping Craster's barricades to seal the entrance anew after his death. The timbers lay in careless piles, nails yet to be driven. The wildlings would break through before dawn, and worse, they would drive the brothers from defending against the others on the northern face. Cotter Pike saw it too. He bellowed down the stairwell for every spare man to hold the yard, then whirled to John. "We can't stay here. Pull back to the yard or we'll be split like a wishbone." John hesitated, scanning the darkness. The others had paused within the tree-line, perhaps ruffled by wildfire, perhaps waiting on new orders. Their pause was the only mercy on offer. He signaled retreat, voice cracking across the parapet. Rangers fell back, hauling arrows, dragging wounded who could still move. Some brothers could not be roused. They lay where frost had kissed them, eyes white as pearls. Down the stair they scrambled, clanging, cursing, boots slipping on ice, to the bleak yard where the line of half-built barricades twisted like a broken spine. Bowen Marsh stood there, sword drawn though his face showed scant will to use it. "Close the gate," he called, but the gate's iron-bound doors hung ajar, splintered where sledges of siege would have struck before the brothers inside could brace them. Wildlings poured from the gloom. Raiders host indeed, though ragged, weary, half-starved. Some bore torches high, others wielded clubs, axes, bronze-tipped spears. Their war cries mingled with the clash of steel on wood. First Rangy then slammed into the barricades, heaving aside planks, met by black-cloaked men swinging halberds. John shoved into the scrum, Longclaw cutting arcs of moonlit silver. Ghost leapt amid the melee, savage and silent, throat clamped on a raider's calf, dragging the man down. A dancing torch cast erratic shadows that made the yard seem alive with phantoms. John drove his pommel into a then's jaw, felt bone crunch. Another wildling fainted low, thrust high, nicking John's shoulder. He turned the stroke, slid down the spear shaft, and rammed Longclaw through the raider's ribs. Hot blood steamed against the steel. When he yanked free, 3 more lurched forward to fill the gap. For every brother lost to fear of Craster's reign, 2 now fought with reckless courage, as though seeking redemption in blood. Ser Dennis Mallister rode through the fray on a shaggy Garin. White-plumed helm knocked askew, long sword painting bright arcs. Cotter Pike faced a giant of a man wielding twin cleavers, and though Pike's left ear fountained blood where a blade glanced, he sunk his axe deep in the giant's thigh, dropping him howling to the slush. Near the heart tree the ground split, snow collapsing inward as though some vast lung below exhaled. A white mist coiled from the fissure. From its depths clawed a gaunt wight still wearing tatters of night's watch black. The creature dragged itself free, eye sockets glowing faint sapphire. Brothers recoiled, crossing blades. John's own hand slipped in gore as he changed grip. "Fire!" he shouted, but torches were few and oil fewer. Sam, of all men, answered. He lunged with a dragonglass dagger, arms shaking, and buried the obsidian in the wight's chest. Frost exploded outward. The corpse sagged, limbs twitching, then lay still, puffs of blue leaking from its cracked ribs like smoke from snuffed candles. Sam stared at the body as though expecting it to thank him. Beyond the yard, the dark glow between trees kindled anew. The others advanced, slower but inexorable. They moved around pools of wildfire's ruin, stepping where snow hissed and refroze. The motes swirled like angry bees about their helms. One raised a sword of crystal so pale it might have been carved from condensed moonlight. With a gesture almost courtly it pointed to Castle Black, and the wind returned in a single roaring gust that doused half the torches in the yard. Flame faltered. Courage faltered with it. Wildlings broke through the last timber barricade on the south flank, flooding inside. Panic buckled ranks. John felt the tide shifting, doom pressing from both horizons. Then, from the east parapet, a horn rang one long, triumphant note. Another answered from the west, and a third from high upon the king's tower. The sound was old, the call for all brothers to form on the Lord Commander. Yet none lived. Bowen Marsh stumbled to the center, eyes rolling whites. "Fall back to the keep," he rasped. "Form a circle, shields locked." But the yard was chaos. Orders were swallowed by screams. The horns sounded again, closer, more insistent, and a figure emerged atop the gatehouse, torch held high. Not Bowen, not Ser Dennis. The flames licked robe and snow alike, revealing Maester Aemon Targaryen. Blind eyes turned unseeing to the battlefield. How he climbed the gatehouse none could guess, but his voice carried, clear and stern as steel. "Brothers," he called, "remember your vows. The realm depends on you. Stand." The wildling in John's path faltered, staring at the blind old man. A ripple passed through friend and foe alike. The horns blew a third time, and the sound seemed to bind fractured courage. Brothers planted feet. Shields locked at last, a ragged ring of black cloaks enclosing the surviving townsfolk and the trembling wildling women Craster had dragged south. John found himself shoulder to shoulder with Sam, Gren, PYP, and Cotter Pike, axes and swords jutting outward. Ghost crouched before the line, lips peeled. The others halted at the fringe of lamplight, luminous eyes appraising. Snow eddied at their feet, swirling too swiftly for any sane wind. One raised its sword again, and from the south a chorus of war horns answered, myriad voices weaving through the cold. Wildlings in the yard turned, confused. Over their heads poured a fresh host of men clad in sealskin and ragged mail, yet bearing torches aloft like banners. At their fore rode a stocky figure crowned by a great rack of antlers. Steer, Magner of then, supposedly slain months past, his brow stitched with new scars. He bellowed in the old tongue, voice rough as avalanched stone. Whatever words he spoke, they cut through the wildling rabble. Half dropped weapons. Others screamed defiance and charged the newcomers. The yard convulsed anew, but Steer had not come to save Castle Black nor to sack it. His riders crashed not at the watch but at the shuffling dead that rose in ever greater numbers through the snow. Bronze spears lanced rotten flesh, torches scythed white limbs. Where another stepped forward with crystal sword poised, Steer's men hurled leather flasks of thick black pitch, torches following like meteors. Flame whooshed tall, hot enough that even pale armor grew faintly pink before the warrior retreated. John stared, bewildered. He caught Dolorous Ed beside him, armor dented, lips split. Since when do then slay the dead to spare the living? Ed wiped blood from his chin. Since the dead started eating then's first, I'd reckon. The line of brothers surged to meet the whites now pinned between two fires. Sam's dragonglass found another heart, then another. PYP snapped a torch across a corpse's spine and jammed the burning shaft through its jaws. Gren hurled an axe that cleaved half a blue-glowing skull. Amid the melee, John spotted the lead other fending off three thens at once. Their bronze spear points shattered on its glass sword, but Steer lunged beneath the parry, driving an obsidian-bladed dagger into the creature's thigh. The dagger hissed, steam coiled, and the other shrieked a sound like ice shearing from a glacier. It reeled back 2 paces, then dissolved in a column of spinning snowflakes that sparkled and vanished. The rest of the others did not flee. Instead, they advanced with methodical precision, eyes burning bright as comets. John knew doom when he saw it. For each one felled, 3 whites collapsed, but for each moment of resistance, more dead rose from the ruined forest beyond. They could fight on and die or fall back and die later. He choked on cold air, mind racing. Fire held them briefly. Dragonglass killed them slowly. Valyrian steel even slower. What else? Old tales whispered of things forged from starfall iron, of dawn silver blades untested in millennia. His hand found Longclaw's pommel, black leather slick with half-frozen blood. The sword felt heavier than fate. He pushed forward through the press, shouting for Ghost. The dire wolf leapt, carving a lane through dead and living alike. John broke free, sliding on bloody snow, and dashed for the heart tree. If the sacrifices had bound these monsters, maybe the same tree, washed in blood, could unbind. Behind him the clamor swelled. Clangor of weapons, crack of bones, roar of wildfire. He reached the weirwood, its bark alabaster streaked crimson where babes had bled. The face carved centuries past appeared to weep anew, sap leaking like fresh tears. John dropped to one knee, sword planted point down. Old gods, he rasped, voice raw. Forgive our folly. Grant us your wrath against these whites of frost. A gust of wind answered, swirling snow from the branches. The carved eyes stared, unblinking, upon the yard. John closed his own eyes. He listened for heartbeats. His ghosts, the restless shuffle of 100 dead feet, and beneath them all the slow thrumming of wood and root and ancient stone. Somewhere deep, he thought he heard water rushing, though no brook ran within miles. Words formed unbidden on his tongue, syllables older than the watch. He spoke them and felt the frost shimmer on his lashes. When he opened his eyes, the world had gone silvery quiet. Every torch flame stretched tall, vertical, as though wind were banished. Brothers and wildlings alike paused mid-fight, gazes sweeping in confusion. Above, the wall cracked, not in failure but like thunder rolled within its mass. Blue veins of light danced along the outer face, racing from eastmost parapet to west. The others halted, heads swiveling as though scenting sour milk. From the depths of the wall came a groan that rattled teeth. A vertical seam of ice, wide as a wagon and tall as 6 men, split from top to bottom.
Ka.
White powder leapt outward in a geyser, obscuring all in blinding haze. Men staggered back, coughing. John shielded his eyes. Through the hiss he felt cold stronger than any before, a cold that bit spirit as well as flesh. For a heartbeat he feared he had called worse doom. Then the cold eased, replaced by a burgeoning heat, harsh and dry, smelling faintly of distant deserts. The snow swirling in the gap ignited amber, each flake glowing like a dying ember before fading. Light spilled from the breach, not icy blue nor wildfire green, but golden, warm, unearthly. Silhouetted within the radiance rose shapes that walked on 2 legs, but no man's legs. Slender, jointed oddly, skin of polished ebony wood. Their eyes glowed a mild green, children of the forest, so the old tales named them. John's breath caught in awe. They advanced without haste, each gripping a short spear of dragonglass wound with vine. Quiet forever reigned around them. When the first other stepped forward brandishing its moonlight sword, one of the children lifted a hand. A single note filled the air. No mortal voice, more vibration than sound. The other halted. Frost peeled from its armor like petals shedding from a wilted bloom, drifting to the ground. Within seconds the creature shrank, limbs crumbling, until only a heap of brittle rime remained. A hush deeper than silence swept the yard. Whites nearest the children spasmed, stiffened, and toppled face first, limbs jerking like marionettes whose strings were suddenly severed. Those farther off turned and fled for darkness but crumbled as they ran, melting into black puddles of rot. John dropped his sword, overcome. Brothers wept openly. Wildlings knelt, heads bowed. Ghosts sat, tail thumping once as if in greeting to these ancient allies. The tallest child stepped toward John. He saw that its hair was woven leaves, its face a mask of polished heartwood. When it spoke, the words flowed inside his skull rather than in his ears. Blood for blood, debt repaid. John found voice. Why now? We have begged aid before. Watched, waited. Choice had to be made. Your choice. Craster's debt was ancient, paid in innocence. Debt broken by fire, by steel, by your hand. Ours to answer then. John exhaled, trembling. Will you stand with us? We stand with life. The child gestured to the breach in the wall, where golden light continued to pour. Life must flow. The wall binds too much dying to the world. Some must pass. At those words the children parted, and through their ranks came wildlings. Mothers clutching babes, old men leaning on bone canes, young warriors sheathing knives. They filed into the yard, eyes wide at carnage but unmolested. Steer limped beside a spear-bearing crone. Both nodded to John as they passed. Behind them, the last motes of icy magic wilted in the warmth. Bowen Marsh shakily approached, weapon lowered. We can't open the gate to thousands. The child's gaze tilted, mildly curious. You closed it once. The night still came. Open it now. Dawn may come instead. Marsh stared, defeated. John laid a hand on his arm. Let them through. They flee the same enemy. Traitors, Marsh croaked. Men, John corrected. Women, children. If they die here, we follow. The direwolf growled agreement. So the gates of Castle Black swung wide, not in surrender but in refuge. Wildlings poured south, torches flickering hope. Brothers lined the yard, watching, weary but no longer enemies. The children remained until the last had passed, then turned eyes north. One bowed to Eamon high above. The blind maester raised empty sockets to the wind, whispering some Targaryen prayer. Ghost whined softly. John touched the direwolf's head, feeling warmth return to marrow. Snow began to fall again, ordinary, gentle flakes that kissed skin without malice. The breach in the wall sealed behind the children, ice knitting like time run backward, until no sign remained save fine golden dust trapped within blue depths. Night surrendered timidly to a pale gray dawn. Fires burned low but without fear of sudden frost. Brothers moved among bodies, laying their own to rest with coins on eyes, burning the whites to ash, stacking broken bronze and steel for the forge. Wildling dead they tended too, side by side. Foes an hour passed, kinsmen now in death. Steer and Cotter Pike argued briefly in four tongues over burial rites, then laughed when neither could claim the gods' favor after such a night. In the Lord Commander's chambers, smoke-stained but standing, a council convened. John, Sam, Bowen Marsh, Ser Dennis, Cotter Pike, Steer, Gilly with babe swaddled. Tormund Giantsbane arrived late bearing news of Mance's main host broken by White Walkers at the Milkwater. Around the old map table, every face bore scars newly minted. Every eye held glints of something harder than steel. Bowen tried to claim the chair by seniority. Ser Dennis countered with valor. Steer offered to lead by conquest. Their voices rose until the babe whimpered and all fell quiet. John met each gaze in turn and found no hunger for crowns left among them, only dread and resolve. He took no seat. He placed Longclaw across the table instead. "The wall is cracked," he said. "The world behind it burned tonight. We can argue over titles after the dead stay dead." He looked to Gilly, to Sam, to Steer. "I will ride south with the wildlings. We'll warn every holdfast, every keep. The White Walkers march on all men. Those who will fight ride back with me. Those who won't," he swallowed, "pray they find walls higher than ours." Bowen Marsh sagged, the mantle of command crushed beneath reality's weight. "Who holds Castle Black?" "All of us," John answered, "and any who come seeking shelter. The children may guard the gap for a time, but not forever." Ser Dennis laid gauntlet fingers atop the Valyrian blade. "We'll hold until you return. Seven send you strength." Steer grinned a red-toothed grin. "Then's march south with you, Snow. We've axe enough for every white from here to Old Town." Sam cleared his throat. "We may need ravens. There aren't enough." He flushed but did not sit back. "But we have words, and words can fly faster than birds when men carry them in fire and fear." The council broke with no final decree, only a single vow shared: to live until dawn, then to live until the next. John stepped onto the outer stair as sun's first rim seared the horizon gold. Ghost trotted ahead, tail erect, sniffing new scents on gentler air. Beyond the gate stretched a wandering column of wildlings, their tracks a black braid across white silk, heading toward kingdoms that would call them foe. John breathed deeply, snow crisp against his lungs yet no longer cutting. He flexed fingers around Longclaw's grip and felt the steel hum with something like hope. The wall behind him loomed cracked but standing, a monument both to failure and to endurance. He thought of Craster's grin, of newborn screams, of frost-shattered swords. Thought of golden light and wordless songs. Thought of Mance Rayder's dream of freedom, Maester Eamon's dream of peace, his father's dream of honor. So many dreams slain amid cold and darkness, yet some spark endured. He started down the ramp toward the waiting columns. Each step felt heavy with stories yet unwritten, battles yet unjoined. But each step also felt lighter than the last, as though some portion of that ancient ice had melted from his blood. The realm still bled, the realm still breathed, and so would he until breath no longer served. Beside him Ghost raised his muzzle and howled, a long, rolling note that carried across trampled snow and charred barricade, across shattered forest and distant hill, a herald to dawn. In that howl John heard not mourning, but promise. A promise 5,000 years old, carved into stone and bone and the very skin of men. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. He had thought the words a chain. Now he knew them for wings. He tightened his cloak, set his eyes on the road where wildlings waited, and walked into the rising sun. The great ash of Craster's pyre still silted the sky when Jon Snow rode out from Castle Black with the dawn. Seated astride a rangy gray courser scavenged from the Shadow Tower's dwindling stables. A cold mist clung to the horse's fetlocks, coiling dense where hoof met snow, and each exhalation burst white from its flared nostrils like smoke from a steaming forge. The narrow track southward glittered beneath a rime so fine it mimicked crushed diamonds, and where moonshine light kissed those shards they winked like watchful eyes. Ghost paced ahead of the column, his coat a whisper of pale flame against rising sun, paws pressing neat hieroglyphs into untouched frost. Behind him shambled a living river of humanity. Mothers bearing swaddled babes, gaunt elders bent over knotted staffs, warriors with patched mail and clouded bronze, children too small to shoulder packs yet forced to carry whatever meager tool their families still possessed. They marched on blistered feet toward kingdoms that would greet them with drawn bows. Yet they marched because the night behind them had grown teeth. Steer, Magner of then, rode just behind John, one thigh swathed in fresh linen where other steel had scored flesh nearly to the bone. The then's antler helm bobbed like a mobile crown with each laboring sway of his shaggy garron. On the third horse trailed Samwell Tarley, gloved hands white-knuckled on the reins, eyes darting left and right as though expecting every clump of wind-gnarled pine to disgorge a white demon. The road south from Castle Black was no true road at all, only a flattened corridor where rangers' boots had long since broken saplings and trampled brush. Even so, the ground felt treacherous. Frost-riven hummocks and ragged pits where burrowing things once nested now lay hidden beneath superficial snow. Ragged cries rose whenever a man twisted an ankle or a child stumbled face first. John ordered the able-bodied to loop spare ropes under the injured's arms, dragging them on improvised sledges of broken shields. Each delay gnawed daylight. By noon, the company had traveled scarcely 4 leagues. Bowen Marsh remained at Castle Black with half the surviving watch, tasked to hold the wall and shelter any refugees lured by ghost stories north of the Gift. His eyes had burned with resentment when John refused to stay, but resentment had withered beneath unspoken truth. Bowen lacked the voice to rally free folk. John alone could bridge that ancient gulf. So Marsh stood on the mid-rampart, cloak snapping in wind, and watched until column and direwolf alike became a gray smear on the white plain. The first day's march ended at a tumble of mossy stones once called Queen's Crown, where a watchtower's shattered stump clawed the sky like a gangrenous finger. John remembered climbing that tower beside Ygritte to spy on the wall, memory pierced like cold steel. Now he and Sam kindled a meager ring of fires between collapsed outbuildings. The children of the forest had vanished after sealing the wall's breach, yet their golden dust still glittered faintly upon John's cloak hem. It caught lamplight whenever he knelt to stir coals. Near twilight, Tormund Giantsbane arrived leading another knot of refugees. Green boys from the Frostfang foothills, elderly mothers from Harrow Hall, 2 maimed spearwives leaning on each other. Tormund's laugh rolled huge, though his eyes carried a hunted sheen. "Ravens on the wing everywhere," he bellowed, jabbing a thumb northward. "Not the black kind neither. We lost 3 good lads at Long Barrow. Walkers came before dusk, quick as hawks." He spat icily. "The bastards don't fear light no more." That night John convened his rough council inside Queenscrown's gutted tower. A ragged bearskin served as tablecloth upon frost-caked stone. Tormund, Steer, Sam, and a stooped spearwife named No Moon gathered in flickering torch glow. Wind whistled through cracked masonry, setting flames to lean one way, then the next, as if the night itself could not decide which ear deserved the whispers first. "We have 3,000 souls at most," John began, voice husky from cold and disuse. "Only 1 in 10 can fight and fewer own decent blades. Wintertown lies 3 days south if we press hard. From there the King's Road opens to Winterfell, White Harbor, Barrowton." Tormund picked something from his beard, either lice or dinner, hard to tell, and flicked it into fire. "Winterfell's burnt," he reminded. "I marched past the ruins moons ago. Smoke still choking the godswood then." John's jaw tightened. "I have kin there no longer, but stone walls still stand. We can garrison parts of the bailey, rig corridors with pitch. Even a broken keep slows wights." Steer grunted. "Stalls them, mayhap, but feed? Your Southron fields yield nothing under snow. You want these crows to trade white shadows for slow famine." Sam cleared his throat. "White Harbor has granaries under manderly care. Lord Wyman's banners still flew when last Eastwatch ravens passed, and his harbor stays deeper than most. Ships could ferry survivors further south where winter's gentler.
Nomones norted.
Gentle, he says. I lay in your gentle, wet snow last year and bled for a fortnight, birthing a babe that died anyway. Her braid swung like a knotted whip as she shook her head. No harbor lord will open gates for wildling scum. They'll string us and salt our heads for pickling. John met her stare. They'll listen if the night's watch speaks with us. They'll listen if you show them proof, Sam added. Bring in others' shattered sword, an ice-crowned skull. Anything they can mock once and tremble thrice thereafter. Lords trust steel and bone before ragged words. Steer leaned on his antler helm. So we trap another. How? Silence yawned. Wind hissed through broken crenels, stirring stray snow into spiraling moats. John thought of the children's song beneath the wall, of blue armor melting at dragonglass. He recalled Bran's stories of secret weirwoods that opened into black tunnels, and Benjen's half-joking quip. Even cold gods fear fire in the veins of a tree. We draw them to the grove, John said finally. Near Winterfell stands a heart tree still alive, charred trunk or no. If the others hate those trees, they'll come when we profane it by living. He rubbed his eyes. At daybreak we ride. We must outrun them before the moon is dark again. Plans spun out. Scouts chosen, sledges for the infirm, small foraging parties to scour thistlewood for winter hare. When the torch gutters thinned to nubs, John dismissed the council. He shouldered his cloak and stepped outside. The night spread wide, brittle and starlit. Fires dotted the ruined town like dying embers across a vast hearth. He walked among sleeping forms huddled in cloaks, inhaled acrid tang of half-cured hides and coppery sickness. Ghost padded silently at his side, eyes twin crimson coals. They passed a boy no old, than 10, curled around an ash-colored cur. The dog growled, but John knelt, stroked its cold stiff ears until it shivered into stillness. Ever since Craster's fall, John had felt a tremor in the world, a subtle vibration resonating in bone more than air. At first he'd thought it dread. Now, beneath stars sharp as spearheads, he understood. The walls shattering had unstrung some deep chord, and the land now thrummed a new music. Whether it heralded dawn or doom, he could not yet say. He found Sam perched on a toppled gate beam, quill scratching parchment by lantern light. Raven scrolls? John asked.
Some startled.
Trying, he admitted, cheeks flushing and cold. He gestured to ink-spattered parchment. I've written 6 messages: Winterfell, White Harbor, Barrowton, even Old Town. I beg them believe. He sighed. But ravens are few and spooked. They refuse to fly.
John clapped Sam's shoulder.
Words may fail.
Ectis seldondu.
Sam's gaze drifted across dark roofs, lingering where a chimney puffed smoke. Craster, the babe, I keep seeing his tiny fingers. He swallowed. Do you think the gods forgive us? I think the gods sent the children when we finally chose right. John exhaled steam. Maybe that's forgiveness. He squeezed Sam's shoulder once more and walked on. They broke camp before first light, scraping frost from cloaks. Snow had fallen lightly, smoothing every footprint. The march resumed. Creak of sled runners, low coughs, babies fussing. By mid-morning, a pale sun lifted behind gauzy clouds, casting long blue shadows. Tormund trudged at the vanguard with John, trading jests to mask fatigue. On the second evening, scouts reported sign of Whites 3 hours behind. Twisted prints dragging north to south in erratic snaking patterns, too many to count. John doubled pickets. He and Ghost prowled the perimeter through night's small hours, ears pricked for cracking ice or unnatural shrieks. Only once did Ghost stiffen, hackles lifting. John froze, breath pluming. Through skeletal birches, a single figure staggered, too tall for man, too lean, skin bluish under moonlight. John knocked arrow to bow, fletched with dragonglass. But the creature veered east, vanished behind a hummock. He did not give chase. Dawn stood 3 hours away, and thousands depended on his strength at sunrise. On the third morning, the column reached Last Weir, a narrow causeway across still water gone to glass under ice. Faint mist clung to the pond. At its center jutted a weirwood sapling barely as thick as John's wrist, crimson leaves shivering. The children's departure had left him wary of sacred groves, yet the sight of that shy red-white bud raised heartbeats. New life defied winter still. They camped at the southern shore. John ordered axes hewed into dead willows and birch for fires, though each crack of splintered wood echoed along the water like a warning drum. Near dusk Sam cried out. John shoved through bodies to find him crouched beside the pond. Beneath ice lurked a face. Pale, slack, eyes wide and blue as high-born sapphires. It pressed upward as though frosted glass were no thicker than skin, lips parting in silent plea. Fingers clawed slow along underside of ice, leaving faint white scratches. John seized Sam's collar and dragged him back. Axes. They struck where the white waited, shattering a jagged oculus. Freezing water erupted, carrying the corpse upward. Clawed wood kicked, face twisting with hunger. Ghost leapt, fangs ripping ragged flesh from cheek. John drove dragonglass dagger through skull. The corpse spasmed, then stilled, floating half-submerged.
Nomon spat.
Dead walk water now. Fear rippled the gathered crowd. John barked for men to drag the thing ashore, hack limbs until sure it would move no more. Fires consumed those parts by moonrise, and oily smoke drifted across the pond until even the sapling weirwood seemed to weep black tears. That night John dreamed of Bran. The boy perched atop Winterfell's broken tower, eyes gone white, speaking through ravens with one voice. "Brother," Bran whispered in a chorus of wings. "The roots reach deep. The wind is not alone. Promise me you'll remember the crypts." John woke, shivering though ghost lay draped across his legs. By day 6 Wintertown's outermost cottages rose from snowdrifts like skulls half unearthed. Smoke no longer puffed from chimneys. Windows gaped dark. Wolves' prints wandered between doors, and the butcher's yard reeked of turned meat long gnawed. The main road wound east toward Winterfell's shadow, broken ramparts silhouetted against a pewter sky. Beyond the gates stood a forest of charred scaffolds, remnants of Bolton cruelty. John's heart thumped. For years Winterfell's towers had filled his dreams, bastion of childhood and promise. He had clung to the memory of warm sunlit courtyards while freezing atop the wall. Now only the gods would still breathe beneath snow, its ancient heart tree gnarled but living, red leaves fluttering like 100 small flags surrendered to wind. They bivouacked outside the castle's collapsed gatehouse until engineers, if 2 blacksmiths and a one-armed carpenter could be so named, shored the sagging arch with raw pine beams scavenged from granary sheds. By afternoon wagons creaked through into the outer bailey, columns snaking past toppled towers where crows perched territorial. Survivors filed into great hall remains, marveling at cracked stone hearth big enough to roast an aurochs. Steer assembled fighting men in the yard. Rangers, thens, spearwives, willing knights watch archers. He drilled them with curt barks, forging shield walls 3 ranks deep, drilling pivot steps to funnel whites through murder lanes marked by tar-filled trenches. Sam took roost in the library tower, its upper floors half collapsed but first level salvageable. Parchments scattered amid bird droppings became salvage for kindling. Sam winced each time he sacrificed history for warmth. He spent hours scrawling fresh letters to White Harbor, adding desperate pleas in clumsy High Valyrian for any maester mightier than himself. John scoured the crypts at dusk, memories echoing off vaulted stone. Stark lords watched in silent granite rows. Brandon the Builder, Cregan the Wolf, Ned Stark, whose effigy still clutched an ice ghost sword. John paused before Ned, tracing stone cheek. "I've failed to guard the realms," he whispered. "But not your children's memory." Ghost roamed aisles, sniffing at dusty sarcophagi. Suddenly he halted near a shattered alcove. The lid lay split. Bones jutted where heavy stones had collapsed. John frowned. No Stark lord should rest in such ruin. He set torch to the shadows, revealing fragments of a smaller tomb partly hidden by rubble. Letters carved crude on lid. Lyanna. John's breath caught. He recalled old secret songs of Rhaegar's roses and "Promise Me, Ned." Beneath fractured lid glinted something odd. twisted black root coiling around a small bundle of cloth. John pried away debris. The root writhed warm beneath his grip, pulsing weakly. He peeled cloth back to reveal a hilt. Valyrian steel dagger slender as a lover's sigh, rippled metal dark gray. Along its spine crawled runes older than men's tongues. John's torchlight flared across blade and root alike until root shivered, then snapped away, retreating into stone like a serpent. He took the dagger, weightless yet heavy with portent. Bran's dream, remember the crypts. This must be what his brother begged. John slid it into boot sheath. Ghost whined but followed. Over the next 2 days, fences of sharpened stakes encircled Winterfell's broken walls. Trenches filled with oil awaited a spark. Inside Great Hall, Styr and Tormund dined at a long trestle-splitting haunch of moose. Drinking sour ale, they insisted Nansen the brown brew in a hurried barrel stave still. Ale tasted like rust and hope. John counted stores. Barley, oats, hardtack, pickled turnip, moldy cheese, half-barrel salt pork gone rancid. Enough for maybe 10 days at half rations. He dispatched foragers east toward Widow's Watch marshlands, risk though they might drown beneath thin ice. Others he sent west to Barrowton's ruins. Ravens no longer came. Sam's letters remained unsent. On the 9th morning since leaving the wall, watchers atop first keep sighted movement. Black line undulating across snow-lit plain. Horns sounded thrice, enemy sighted. John climbed rampart ladder 3 steps at a time. Far north marched an army of corpses, ragged as scarecrows yet disciplined by cold despair. Between their ranks strode tall bone-pale figures garbed in rippling frost, eyes bright as twin moons. 50, perhaps 60 others. 500 whites at least. The drawbridge had been jammed with new beams. Gatehouse partly barred. Still John's jaw clenched. Trenches were only half full. Pitch yet uncured. Archers low on dragonglass. Styr's drill lines wavered with nerves. Wildling children evacuated to crypts alongside infirm. John posted PYP and Gren to guard stairs. Sam stood trembling by Maester's rookery, clutching a single raven. A grizzled white friend from his boyhood, who alone remained tame. If the gate falls, John told him, let it fly with message describing what broke us. Someone must learn.
Sam nodded, tears bright.
He stroked Raven's wings. Snow fell heavy by midday, big flakes swirling chaotic. Whites advanced silent, their passage setting powder roiling around ankles. Others' swords whispered, slicing the air though no foe yet near. At 200 yards they halted. One stepped forward, raising slender horn of ice veined with night blue. The sound it blew chilled marrow. Not quite note, more raw vacuum that yanked heat from flesh. Fires in trenches guttered, pitch thickening. Styr roared orders. Archers loosed first volley, dragonglass shards glittering. Few struck, wind buffeting flight. Those that hit pierced white flesh but shattered on others' armor. The pale commander tilted head. Shards tinkled from pauldrons like thrown snow. Then whites charged, no banshee scream, only pounding feet. Shield walls held first impact. Then round shields locked with stolen iron and even battered Stark kite shields. Spears jabbed, halting momentum. But press behind whites forced others against blades like tides smashing cliffs. First ranks impaled themselves only to rise again, hurling bodies over shields. John fought on parapet walkway, raining arrows while ghosts snarled beside would palisade at ground level. The dire wolf ripped throat from a reanimated free folk youth, then leapt to hamstring a scarred bear white lumbering among humans. John's 5th arrow drove dragonglass through blacksmith white's eye. Corpse sank limp, but where whites fell, others advanced. 3 strode into trench. Oil burst into blue flame but shrank before them, as though licking glass. 1 raised sword touched oily mire. Fire hissed into steam. They stepped across. No Moon lunged from line, swinging 2-handed axe. She met first other head-on, blade biting glass sword. Valyrian steel? No. Plain iron snapped, axe head spinning into snow. She snarled, spat blood from bitten tongue, punched dragonglass shard into other's neck. Frost exploded. Creature shrieked, body crystallizing, yet sword still swung once more. It sheared her collarbone. She fell screaming. Tormund bellowed, hewed at same other. His stolen steelwood club crushed crystalline chest, but not before sword slashed his thigh nearly through. Jon saw Giantsbane topple, roared, vaulted railing, landing amid churned slush. He drew Longclaw and the crypt dagger twin-wheeled. Valyrian blade met crystal. Sparks blew and white leapt. Dagger flicked upward at other's unarmored armpit. Runes glowed faint violet as metal kissed flesh. With crack like tree splitting under frost, the other shattered into a plume, fragments glittering as they drifted. Nearby whites froze mid-charge. Blue lights extinguished in sockets. Limbs slack. 20 collapsed at once. Jon staggered back, chest heaving. The dagger pulsed warm. Tormund's face contorted in pain, but still he grinned. That's a dog's bite we needed. Jon hauled him toward medic sled behind second rank. Blood spurted. Sam hurled binding cloth. Battle raged hours. For every other slain by daggers or dragonglass pikes, 2 more pressed line. Yet each death unraveled strings controlling a clutch of whites. Steer realized and shifted tactic. Rangers flanked, targeting commanders with pairs. One to parry with steel, second to stab with obsidian. Losses mounted. Ground slicked crimson and black. Late afternoon sun dipped behind purple clouds when Horn of Ice sounded retreat. Remaining others, perhaps a dozen, glided backward, whites stumbling after. Brothers hurled torches, but darkness swallowed figures. When the dead withdrew beyond bowshot, silence collapsed upon Winterfell heavy as tomb air. Snow still fell but soft now, drifting onto piles of corpses heaped along trench. Battlefields steamed faintly. Vultures already circled, though none dared land near residual magic. Inside yard, healers hustled from body to body. Sam knelt by No Moon, who lay pale, chest rising shallow. He pressed wine-soaked rag to gash. She gripped his wrist, whispered something lost in wind, and sank into stillness. PYP sat cross-legged beside Gren, splinting broken spear arm. Gren grumbled nonsense, shock fogging eyes. Jon wiped blade on rag, slid dagger next to heart. Its runes still smoldered faintly. He climbed wall for vantage. In the distance, retreating army melded into gray horizon. They had won or survived, but only dusk's mercy parted them from next assault. They burned bodies for 2 days, corpses stacked like cordwood across Bailey, pyres whose heat blistered stone. The smell clung to hair, skin, hope. Snow melted into muddy ruts, melted again each new flame. Sam read prayers till voice cracked. The council, Steer leaned on crutch. The pale gods come again before moon turns. We lost quarter our fighters, half our arrows, near all pitch. Tormund, leg bandaged, swallowed pain. But we took their teeth. They can bleed or crumble.
Sam Ramit scrolls.
If we could trap several others within the gods would burn them with wildfire. There is none, Jon said. What little the watch stored under Castle Black spilled on the wall weeks ago. He rubbed temples. Another path. Strike first. Seek their creation's source. He touched dagger. Bran spoke of roots. Beneath these crypts run secret passages deeper than catacombs, tied to the weirwood. Maybe they lead north. Maybe we end this at its heart. Silence. Candle smoke curled overhead. Steer spat. Or maybe you crawl into Snow Serpent's gut and vanish. Jon shrugged. Better one vanish than all freeze.
Sam licked lips.
Bran's dreams. He saw the Night King's lair far north of the gorge. A lake perpetually frozen. Tower of black ice. If crypt tunnels reach miles beneath, they might open near there. He smiled wanly. Old Nan called it the Door of Snow, but scholars dismissed. Tormund slammed fist. Door or no, we march. Better break foes' fangs than count our own losses till none left. Thus plan formed. Strike north with band of 50 best. Slip beneath snow via crypt tunnels, if tunnels existed. Meanwhile Steer would fortify, send ravens west to House Mormont, south to White Harbor again. They would hold Winterfell at any cost. Jon chose the 50, Gren though arm healing, Dolorous Ed, PYP, 6 rangers from Shadow Tower, 15 then spearmen, 20 spearwives quick with dragonglass darts, Sam though he protested. And Ghost of course. They prepared 3 days. On the 4th dawn they descended crypt steps carrying torches of pine resin. Deep, deeper, past Lord's tombs smelled of cold earth, down to collapsed corridor walled by rubble. John unsheathed dagger. Runes flared violet, casting eerie glow. Stones shuddered. Root veins black and wet pulsed along ceiling. With each rune pulse, roots recoiled, stones shifting aside until a jagged arch appeared gaping black. Ed muttered, 7 hells, Snow. You sure your blood's not half wizard? John ignored. He ducked inside. The passage sloped downward steep and twisting. Distance lost meaning. Torch flame flickered but smoke drifted forward, as though air itself inhaled sweat and fear. Walls throbbed with faint heartbeat he could feel on fingertips, as if Winterfell's weirwood extended veins far. Occasionally side shafts branched, but dagger guided them left, left, ever left. Hours blurred. Water dripped, froze on cloaks, melted again. Finally stench of ozone drifted, and passage opened onto cavern vast and domed by glittering ice. Blue light emanated from smoky crystals embedded in walls. At center stood stone dais, carved with spirals that bled outward across floor. Upon dais lay shattered swords fused into crude crown.
Some exhale da plume.
Dragon steel. He knelt, fingers hovering but not touching. Old as dawn. Gren peered into gloom. Sea doors opposite, maybe lead to realm of snow. John approached crown. Blade runes pulsed stronger. Crown shards quivered. He sensed memory coiled inside metal, echoes of forging under starfire. He reached out, but stalemate ended. Ice cracked in ceiling and a scream of wind bellowed down shaft. Shadows lifted from walls. Shadows that solidified into slender figures armored in liquid night. For others stepping soundless, swords aloft. Then's formed crescent. John brandished both blades. First other darted, sword singing.
Valerian stil met frostglaas. Shock num de rist.
Spearwife hurled dart. A flicker of obsidian that pierced shoulder joint. Other hissed. Crystal black spider-webbed across chest. John lunged, dagger to throat. Explosion of rime and silvery vapor. Second other cleaved spear in half, skewered then through gut. Horror split ranks. Ed grabbed torch, thrust into creature's visor. Flame sputtered but slowed blade long enough for Gren. Left arm still stiff, to bash with iron hammer, shattering helm. Obsidian dagger finished. 2 remained. Sam loaded crossbow with dragonglass bolt. Fired. Bolt zipped, grazed third other's thigh. Shard chipped but blade still rose. Ghost leapt, jaws closing on ankle. The direwolf's weight toppled creature. John hacked crystal legs. Sam jammed second bolt into exposed eye. Convulsed, burst. Last other, taller, helm whirled like swirling stars. Advanced to dais, hands splayed over crown shards. Crystal threads rose from ice, knitting into fresh blade unlike any snowglass. Black as midnight, veins of red pulsing. It lifted sword, pointed at John. Air thrummed electric. Frost crept over boots. John felt dagger scorching hot. He ran, liquefying snow underfoot. Their blades met. Impact through sparks crimson white, lighting cavern. Wounds from earlier battle throbbed, but he pressed, parried, circled. Others' eyes twin auroras. It swung overhead. John ducked, rolled, slashed calf. Runes seared into flesh. Pale steam erupted. Creature stumbled. John feinted left, stabbed through armpit. Steel bit. No burst. The sword different, harder. Other screamed. A true voice, female, ancient grief. Echo shook stalactites. It grabbed John's wrist, cold as vacuum. Flesh burned. He dropped long claw, grappled at belt, withdrew dragonglass fist Spike Tormund had fashioned. He drove it into creature's throat root. Burst of dark frost shot upward. Other's body imploded into shards that ricocheted, severing root veins in ceiling. Ice groaned. Cracks galloped across dome. Out! John shouted. They snatched crown shards, hauled wounded. Cavern collapsed in avalanche of splintering ice. Passage behind them sealed by fallen slabs. They fled back up serpentine tunnels lit now by dagger pulses alone. They emerged in crypt hours later, soaked, bruised, but alive. Above, Winterfell shook wit.
H distant percussion.
John feared new assault but found courtyard hushed. Instead, black clouds billowed north beyond walls, swirling into monstrous vortex lit inside by azure lightning. It spun slowly, siphoning snow upward like a pillar. Where it touched earth, frozen lake cracked, sending geysers of ice. Sam whispered, "You severed their heart." John answered through chapped lips, "Maybe only woke it." Within an hour, the sky above vortex split, revealing starless well. Through it descended figure immense, robed in midnight, crown of jagged winterfire. The Night King himself, myths breathed into world. He strode across plains toward Winterfell, every step blooming ice flowers. Behind him surged new horde, not shambling but marching in perfect phalanx, thousands. Tormund cursed, "Your wizarding cracked corn, nest of hornets." John studied crown shards pulsing in bag. Not hornets, queens. He turned to Sam. "How many shards?" 7 larger, 10 small chips. Forged together they could birth new blade, something to match his. "How?"
Sam sputtered.
"Dragon fire," said Gren hoarsely. John's eyes fixed south. "Dragons are gone, but blacksmith's forge still stands. Heat of coal insufficient." Steer limped closer. "Heat of wildling hearts not," he joked grimly. Then expression shifted. "Unless, in Skago's caves, fireworms brood, spawn of mountain's belly. Their breath melts stone." John considered. Skago's lay east across bay, unreachable. Yet deeper in Winterfell crypts rumor told of hot springs ancient, that warmed walls even now. The old lords had harnessed heat for baths year-round. He turned to Sam. "Sulfur vents feed those springs. We shunt steam into forge, stoke coal with dragonsteel shards, hammer new sword." Tormund grinned. "We'll give hammering." Thus began forge frenzy. Blacksmith Nansen, arm in sling, oversaw. Runes on shards glowed when heated. They melded like wax. Sparks danced violet. Noise echoed through courtyards as columns of dead approached outer fields. Archers burned last arrows to delay wights. Trenches reignited with tar wetted by spring water then laced with lamp oil. Inside smithy, John wielded hammer though palms blistered. Each strike rang like bell of heaven. Blade lengthened, edges folding light. Nansen quenched in salted spring. When cooled, steel drank surrounding torches glow, reflecting ripples of ghostly flame. They christened sword Dawnbreaker, though older than dawn, heavier than break. Runes along fuller reed. Nissa to Asha, sky to sea. None knew tongue. Night King breached trenches. Frost parted tar flame, smothered with wave of his raised hand. Whites slammed shield lines. Winterfell's walls rattled. John strapped sword across back, mounted gray courser. Ghost loped aside. Steer, Tormund, and 50 remained to defend walls, while Sam and his raven climbed broken tower ready to chronicle. Courser leapt ruined gatehouse, hooves sparking on ice ramp. John rode alone across field between armies, ghosts streaking ahead. Whites parted, obeying unspoken will. Night King awaited amid ring of wind, his eyes twin comets. He drew black blade born of cavern. Lightning crackled overhead. Snow swirling slowed, as though time kneeled. John dismounted, drew Dawnbreaker. Violet and crimson danced across length. Dagger remained at hip. Ghost crouched, growling low. Night King raised hand. Frost coalesced into spear. He hurled. John rolled, spear grazing cloak, freezing fibers instantly. He charged. Blades met with clang that shook earth. Dawnbreaker seethed red veins clashing black frost. Where steel touched, air burst spark storms. They circled. Night King struck in looping arcs unnaturally swift. John parried twice, riposte under arm, missed. Wind screamed each swing. Ghost lunged, jaws at calf. Night King kicked Wolf aside with ice-shod foot. Jon felt anger flood veins. He fainted low, stepped inside guard, slid dagger from sheath, slamming into Night King's hip. Obsidian sank half-inch before dagger cracked, shards scattering. Night King backhanded Jon across jaw. World flashed white. He staggered, tasted blood. Dawnbreaker flickered, as if aware. He remembered father's words. The man who passes the sentence. Jon planted feet. Night King advanced, black blade overhead. Jon raised Dawnbreaker two-hand grip.
Swordsmith.
Crack like world heart splitting. Black blade fractured, chunks tumbling like obsidian hail. Night King's eyes widened fraction. Jon twisted, drove Dawnbreaker through chest. Light exploded outward, ribbons of scarlet and gold weaving skyward like aurora. Night King screamed, a sound both thunder and child's wail, then shattered into cyclone of snow that raced upward, sucked into vortex overhead. Across fields whites halted, limped, then collapsed, limbs unraveling to dust as if puppet strings severed from star. Silence rolled like tide. Snow ceased. Jon dropped to knees. Ghost limped over, pressed snout to cheek. Tormund's roar echoed from wall. Triumph. Above, vortex closed. Sky cleared, revealing stars new bright. Dawn's early fire painted horizon rose. Jon rose unsteady, lifted Dawnbreaker. Sword reflected young sun's first kiss. He walked back. Survivors opened gate, cheers mingling with sobs. Steer clasped his forearm. Sam descended tower, scrolls forgotten, tears glistening. Gren hooted. Ed muttered prophecy of new chores. PYP hugged Jon until ribs protested. Later, within Godswood, Jon sank before Heart Tree. Red leaves whispered. He placed broken dagger shards at trunk, offering to old gods and sibling who guided hand. Sap trickled, coating obsidian in film of crimson sap that glowed. Winter not ended. Snow still deep. Shattered kingdoms must reconcile thousands of free folk wandering south. But dawn had broken Night King's reign before it spread, and among roots and ruin hope seeded anew. Jon looked upon battered castle, battered people, battered self. He sheathed Dawnbreaker, turned to friends. One step, then another across blood-soaked snow warming under rising sun. Ghost padded beside, leaving twin tracks of wolf and man, forward into future uncertain, but free of ice chains at last. The cinders of Winterfell's victory fires still smoldered when riders appeared upon the King's Road, their banners sagging in raw wind. Green and silver trout of House Tully trailed beside the crescent moon of House Manderley, flanked by the black and red fiery heart of the King's men, who wore Stannis Baratheon's sigil, though Stannis himself had perished at the Crofters' village 2 winters past. At their head rode Ser Brynden Tully, gaunt, silver hair tied at his nape, boiled leather patched where an arrow had found him 6 days earlier yet failed to slow his pace. Beside him lumbered Ser Marlon Manderley, cheeks pink beneath downy beard, eyes sunken from long marches and nights of famine stew. Behind them clattered 300 spears, some little more than poles tipped with scavenged iron, but their discipline glimmered in the steady cadence of boot and hoof. Jon Snow watched from the shattered barbican, cloak hanging in ash-gray folds. Dawnbreaker lay in its rough wolf-hide sheath across his back. The blade's faint ruby veins pulsed like a second heartbeat he could feel through wool and mail. Ghost lay at his feet, tail twitching, muzzle flecked where fresh snow caught the last of the wolf's breath. As Tully and Manderley rode beneath the broken portcullis, Jon descended rubble-hewn steps to greet them. Ser Brynden swung down stiffly, his old joints crackling. "You look half ghost yourself, boy," he rasped, eyes scanning fire still being doused. Rumors reached White Harbor that the wall fell and all the dead with it. Looks you stopped both, or at least slowed them. Jon clasped the Blackfish's forearm. Stopped enough. He inclined his head to Marlon. "Your Lord Father? Too stout to ride," Marlon panted. "Too proud not to send us. Lord Wyman holds the harbor and the fleet." When word flew of dire wolves and wildling armies marching south, but more, that the Night King walked again. He sent every soul willing to shoulder steel. We came fast as snow allowed. John ushered them through the gatehouse where smoke drifted from smithy chimneys. The yard still stank of charred flesh, though the dead were long burned. Free folk children skittered between piles of unsanded timbers. Then warriors lugged quarried blocks to shore the inner curtain wall. The newcomers stared, some with awe, others unease, at wildlings laboring side by side with black-cloaked watchmen. "This is now the hearth for anyone still breathing north of the neck," John told them. "We have beds in Great Hall and grain enough for 2 weeks. After that we forage or starve." Ser Brinden scratched frost from his beard. Riverland's harvest was meager, yet White Harbor's granary barges lie ready. "If your free folk will man oars, we can run the Mander to Maidenpool or from Wolf's Den south to Gulltown for saltfish." John gave a weary smile. "They will row." Tormund Giantsbane emerged, limping on crudely carved crutch yet grinning wide enough to split beard. "Row? We'll row till arses blister if Southrons pay in ale." He clasped Marlin's shoulders in bare hug, eliciting squeak from the younger knight. Samwell appeared brandishing parchment. "Ravens from Deepwood Mott and Barrowton," he reported. "Lady Glover offers timber, Lord Dustin Steele scraped from tombs. He claims his barrows still echo with white claws scratching." John's face hardened. "Echoes or no, we answer soon. Tonight we feast, if 3 cauldrons of turnip soup count a feast." His gaze swept the courtyard. "Tomorrow we march again." 12 days later the convoy stretched 5 leagues. Ox-drawn sledges loaded with wheat sacks, trundling wagons bearing women and infants swaddled in patchwork furs, Manderly spearmen riding flanking columns, free folk skirmishers scouting ridgelines. Snow ceased halfway through the first week, leaving brittle crust that shattered under hoof. Days warmed enough to melt top layer to slush, nights refroze, forging ruts sharp as blades. Many horses went lame. 2 babes died of lung fever. 3 elders never woke. Tormund carried the bodies each dawn to cairn-crested hills, laying them beneath stone eyes to watch the skies forever. He wept openly. No one mocked him now. They skirted Torrens Square, its walls pocked by old siege but torches glowing friendly within. Lady Edera Tallheart met them, cheeks reddened in crisp air, 200 green boys behind her spears trembling as though they marched inside a dream. "We heard the dire wolf howling," she said, eyes fixed on Ghost. "It sang of dawn and death together." She pledged Tallheart bond, sending half her stores and 30 huntsmen to cull what game yet roamed Wolfswood. Past the shivering forest a pall hung where oaks still smoldered from the Night King's passing. Trees there had wept black sap. Sam explained frostfire boiled blood out of trunks until bark burst. The path wound through that charred gloom 3 miles. Torches seemed to shrink within. Ghost's hackles bristled. Many refugees sobbed silently. Emerging, they found the Lake Bran had prophesied. Smooth mirror frozen, tower of collapsed midnight ice at center like shattered fong. John halted army on shoreline. Crevices rimed the surface, some wide as ships, others hair-fine. Here the Night King had raised his fortress. Here his absence left wound upon the world. Free folk rangers picked across ice islands, gathering shards of black crystal that once formed walls, stacking them on sledges. Sam insisted such relics held secrets to the cold magic, secrets maesters must study if realm would thwart a second-long night. At dusk John knelt at lake's rim where water lapped, thawing a long broken ring. He plunged Dawnbreaker's tip into ripple. Steam hissed, ring of warmth radiated, reflections fractured, yet at sword's center white motes rose, snow melting upward. A woman's voice, faint as reed wind, whispered his name. He thought perhaps Lyanna again, promise me lifting out of deep places. But words scattered, lost to evening hush. When he pulled blade free, water froze smooth. He left none sea tears lingering on lashes. At White Harbor they found Gate of the Gods propped open, portcullis chains rattling but not lowered. Gallows gray Manderly banners rippled along battlements. John, Tormund, Ser Brinden, and Sam rode forefront as columns filed between alabaster walls. Small folk lined cobbles, gaped at giants seizing wagons of grain and at spearwives in patched sealskins clutching infants at breast. Murmurs rose, wildlings, others layers, ghost wolf. Fear wrestled fascination. In Market Square, the Lord of White Harbor waited. Lord Wyman Manderley seated on reinforced chair, robes of sea blue velvet embroidered with golden mermaids but stained with broth from midday meal. He looked diminished, weight lost, neck folds sagging like melted parchment, yet eyes glinted cunning as ever. He rose gingerly. "Snow, they say you slew the Night King." His booming voice spread, echoing off fishmongers' stalls, and broke the wall so men might stand side by side. John dismounted, bowed. Blade struck home, but thousands laid path. His glance toward free folk. "And side by side we will stand or be buried." Lord Wyman spread arms. "Then let this harbor be anvil where northern crescent forges anew." He pointed cane at Tormund. "You are many mouths, my granaries half empty, but my fleets crave rowers, my docks crave labor. Work, and fish become plenty." Tormund thumped chest. "Give us nets. We feed half your city afore first thaw." A murmur of grudging approval rippled through spectators. Diplomacy stretched days. Sam met maesters in Leaning Tower trading scrolls for salt pork. Ser Brinden brokered levy of river barges to ferry families south to Hornwood Fields. John walked long wharves where Leviathan bones hung. He allotted then carpenters to repair hulls. At night he dined in Merman's Court beneath vaulted ceiling painted with swirling whales. Lord Wyman toasted to stark men, bastard no more, hinting at letters from King's Landing proposing amnesty and titles if realm united against any future spectral threat. John drank watered wine, offered neither pledge nor refusal. On the seventh night ravens arrived. One bore seal of Archmaester Runsider of the Citadel. News that every glass candle south of Neck blazed with green flame the hour the Night King died, and did not fade for a day. Scholars feared rupture between world and winter realm was not healed, merely sutured. Another raven from Lady Sansa Stark, now Lady Regent in the Vale under Lord Robert Arryn's weak rule, begged confirmation John yet lived and entreaty he visit to testify before southern lords, else rumors of necromancy grow unchecked. John folded parchment, shoulders weighed heavy. "The dead slew our children," he told council of new allies, "but fear rules the living." He appointed Tormund custodian of free folk quarters along river mouth, Ser Brinden to marshal joint fleet patrols, and Sam as envoy to Citadel. "I ride to Vale," he announced, "with Dawnbreaker." Steer snorted. "Go south too long and you return soft." John clasped his forearm. "If I return at all." The moon waxed full as John, Ghost, Marlon Manderley with 50 knights of the Green Glen, and Sam, insisting, rode from White Harbor. Frozen causeways soon gave to bare earth where crocus spears broke thaw. They crossed Last River on ferry sleigh, climbed King's Road softened to mud, weaved through looming sentinel pines of Moon Door Pass. Nights spent beneath wind-carved overhangs while mountain owls hooted. Sam quaked each time, but wrote by firelight notes on post-other sociocultural integration. The quill scratching until sleep claimed him mid-sentence. At Bloody Gate, Lady Sansa's steward met them. Ser Shadrich, once Selsword. He ushered them along narrow pass hugging precipice, then across long ramp to Ares' lower keep. John marveled at sky white with late snow swirling around peaks like ash stirring in kiln. He last came here as boy of 10, too shy to greet Arryn cousins. Now he strode with sword forged of starfire. Lady Sansa met him in high hall, auburn hair coiled beneath snowy mantle, pale eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You're thinner than I remember," she whispered. He embraced her, feeling bones beneath velvet. They spoke in hush. Bran's visions true, Arya gone south chasing faceless paths, Rickon lost, maybe alive with Skagosi, which clans. Tears fell. Ghost laid head in Sansa's lap. Council convened. Bronze Yon Royce, Lord Horton Redfort, Lady Anya Waynwood sat around crescent table. Maester Coleman read accounts of ice fiends. Doubting yet wary, John laid Dawnbreaker on oak boards. Sword glowed faint, warmth radiating. Murmurs stilled. He recounted Wall's breach, Craster's tyranny, Children of Forest, Night King's defeat. When finished, Royce simply said, 7 defend us. No other oath remained. They asked what he sought. Not crowns, John said. I need grain, smiths, masons. North must rebuild moats, raise beacon towers, forge obsidian spear points. A watch of men and women, bound not by law but memory. He looked round. Lend this and North swears trading pact longer than summer. Royce jerked beard. Steel we have, food less sure. Vale's harvest froze last month. But men thrive on purpose. Sansa rose, voice clear. I will send 500 stonemasons, 2,000 quarriers, 20 wagons oats, and the Knights of the Vale to patrol the King's Road. She gazed at council. The realm owes my brother its dawn. No vote opposed. John lingered fortnight. He sparred knights in Round Yard. Dawnbreaker ringing against Valyrian sword Lady Waynwood's son had inherited. Ghost-harried goats on scree slopes, scaring stable hands. Sam pored over dusty tomes in Airy Library, discovering references to Blood of the Snow Lion, an order predating Night's Watch that roamed Frostfang centuries before Undull Landing. He surmised their sigil, white lion breathing red flame, matched runes on Dawnbreaker's hilt. Sword, perhaps relic of that brotherhood. John wrote letters, one to Lord Davos Seaworth at Sisterton, urging convoy of Lyseni Pitch, one to Maester Runsider seeking Dragonbone crossbow schematics, one to Lord Tycho Nestoris in Bravo's requesting credit line, knowing Iron Bank always bet on survivors. At last he departed Vale escorted by 20 Sky Knights. Weather grew kinder. Ice receded from gullies, crocuses blossomed. They rode to Gulltown where Manderley barges waited. News of their passage spread. Small folk knelt as they crossed muddy squares. Children touched ghosts' fur for luck. All along road, rumors flew of white wolves guiding lost travelers. Some swore Jon Snow's blood glowed through his skin. Sam snorted at most tales but scribbled them anyway. Back at White Harbor, work thrummed. Free folk rowers unloaded ships heavy with barley, tool iron, Dornish oranges curling in straw. Masons raised seawall additions shaped like snarling direwolves. Tormund laughed, saying even fish would fear those fangs. Steer drilled Knight's torch regiment. Free folk spearmen issued lamplight pikes tipped with obsidian. Lord Wyman oversaw feast days proclaiming unity, though he still insisted pies remain pork rather than northerner. Morale Burjond. John rode north with supplies. At Winterfell, he found walls half restored, watchtowers crowned by new beacons fueled with whale oil. Young archers kept vigil. At their belts hung dragonglass knives Sam's smelters mass-produced by fusing volcanic glass with slime from hot springs, creating brittle but deadly blades. Sam delivered treatises on cold magic attenuation to Maester's cell. He insisted the citadel send ravens. The breach in wall sealed but still fragile. If children's golden dust lost potency, cracks might spread. Old Town responded with promise of Archmaester expedition come spring. Snow fell heavy one morning. John walked Godswood path where red leaves glowed beneath white blanket. Heart Tree's eyes seemed softer. He spoke quietly. Of loss, of duty, of uncertain future. Branches rustled though no wind. Ghost whined, pressing head to John's knee. In hush he heard voice faint as breath. You did not fail. Sounded like Ned, or maybe only memory. Seasons churned. Spring thaw crept north slower than rumor, but still it came, dripping from eaves, turning battlements to waterfalls. Wheat sprouted in Wintertown plots plowed by free folk women singing songs of mountain goats. White Harbor's fleet patrolled Narrow Sea, capturing Myrish slavers who tried to steal children for fiery priests. They surrendered quick when faced with men who had slain the dead. Dawnbreaker earned fame. Jon seldom drew it except to knight a valiant spear wife, or to heal. Blade's heat cauterized wounds as cleanly as Maester's iron. Some said sword drank pain. Men cut by it in training felt strange calm before ache. At midsummer's dawn, Archmaester Runsider's caravan arrived. Wagons stacked with bronze mirrors, glass cylinders, crank machines. He toured Wall's breach escorted by Tormund and Steer. They discovered golden dust dimming. Runsider proposed erecting reflecting towers to trap sunlight, channel into ice to recharge luminous particles. Jon approved, thinking sunrise now weapon 2. Meanwhile, mysterious sickness swept free folk quarter. Skin pale, breath cold though fever burned. Sam traced cause. Bits of black crystal children pocketed from lake. The shards leached chill through skin, blood slowed, hearts faltered. Sam gathered every shard, sealed them in dragonglass jars sunk deep into hot spring caverns where heat neutralized residue. 3 died before cure, but many more lived. Autumn wore leaves copper when Queen Daenerys Targaryen's fleet anchored off Skagos. Sailors carried tales south. Young queen with silver hair, 3 dragons circling masts, intent to reclaim Westeros after seasons in exile. Jon read Raven thrice. He recalled stories of last dragons and Valyrian fire that could kill the cold for all time. He pondered traveling to Skagos, but vow kept him. North still fragile. He sent Sam's treatise by swift ship, entreating Queen to parley. While waiting, he built counsel. Sansa by Raven, Tormund in person, Lord Wyman wheezing songs of mermaids, Bronze Yohn Royce representing Vale, Lady Edera Tallheart, Ser Brynden Tully whose health faded but whose counsel sharp. They sat in Winterfell Great Hall. Rafters newly hewn, banners of dire wolf, merman, trout, bronze falcon, red flaming heart resown with white sunburst, to draft Accord of the Dawn. Charter founding Dawn Watch. Order of freeborn and noble sworn alike to guard north from any returning dark. They named Jon Snow High Steward, a laughable title he accepted only so others might rally behind. Feasts followed, salt pork again, but now seasoned with wild onion and dried orange rind from south. Children danced. Bards sang of white wolf and red sword. Night of the feast, dawnbreaker began to thrum. Jon excused himself to Godswood. Heart tree blood leaves rustled though air calm. Sword pulsed crimson deepening to violet. Jon knelt. Ghost circled restless. A voice, older than forest, filled clearing. Balance restores, yet shadow lingers under marble shores. He saw vision. Seas boiling black, dragons screaming, city of domes cracked and burning. A comet split sky. He gasped, blade dimmed. Sam later thought perhaps magic of cold now shifting south as heat rose, opposites chasing. Jon knew only new war loomed. When Queen Daenerys sailed into White Harbor next spring, dragons circling like eclipses of flame, free folk fled boats, children gaped skyward. Drogon's wingspan cast streets into night. The queen dismounted jet scales at Merman's court gates, flanked by Missandei and Grey Worm. Tormund whistled. Never seen a woman rode by bigger beast, except my third wife maybe. Jon met Daenerys in Lord Solar. She wore dark leather, silver rings coiling fingers, eyes violet as dusk. They spoke alone save Ghost who watched warily. I knew your brother Rhaegar's son might live, she began, voice soft but edged. You are he if word be truth. Stark blood hides Targaryen heart. I know only duty, Jon said. He told her Night King's downfall, Dawnbreaker's forging. Your dragons could help hold breaches should cold return. My sword may temper dragonfire. She studied him. Fire and ice. She smiled faintly. Good name for son of ours, she teased, then grew solemn. I came to claim Iron Throne. Yet realm nearly died while Lord squabbled. Perhaps throne must wait. Jon inclined head. People need harvest more than crowns. They reached accord. Dragons patrol northern sky first 2 years, burning any pockets of whites thawing. In exchange, free folk rowers crew royal fleet, and Dawnwatch vow to guard queens march south when time ripe. Feast that night dwarfed all before. Dragons roared over battlements. Free folk lit bonfires on walls. Winterfell's repaired towers shone with sapphire glass lanterns Runsider gifted. Music of pipes and skin drums mingled with bells rung from docked ships. Jon and Daenerys danced awkward in snow-dusted courtyard, heat from dragons thawing flakes before they landed. Sansa later teased him his face looked less dour than winter. Yet amid revel, Sam slipped parchment into Jon's hand. Citadel glass candles flared again. showing silhouette of horned figure in stepstones commanding sea whites. Cold had sought new shore while realm celebrated. Jon pocketed scroll. He caught Daenerys's gaze across firelit yard. She nodded, saw weight returned. He exhaled fog that coiled upward like silent vow. Winterfell dawn 3 days hence. Jon saddled gray courser once more, dawnbreaker slung, wearing new cloak, white direwolf stitched with red heart tree leaves, ghost trotted, fur rippling. Daenerys mounted Drogon, scales glinting, Tormund, Steer, Sansa, Sam, Wyman, bronze yone-lined gate, each offering parting salute. Axe raised, quill lifted, pie wagged. Jon turned in saddle. Voice carried, dawn came once. It will come wherever dark falls. Ride the winds. He grinned at Sam. And write smaller words next book. Trumpets sounded. Dragons leapt. Dawnwatch banners unfurled. Direwolf, Lion Son, Merman, Trout, Kraken of House Botley returned to loyalty. Dragon three-headed red. Columns tramped south toward stepstones where new ice besieged surf. Snow no longer blanketed fields, yet chill lingered in hearts. Reminder winter sleeps light. Above marching ranks, shadow of Drogon swept, vast wings beating against morning. Sun blazed on dawnbreaker's edge, casting line of light over spearmen helms, over children waving, over ruins reborn. Jon lifted blade. Crimson gleam danced across steel, across dragon's black hide, merging in single streak across sky. Red of fire, red of blood, red of leaves that whisper old names. As the host vanished beyond white knife turn, grain sprouts bowed in same wind that carried banners. Heart tree leaves rustled farewell, and deep within still healing wall, golden moats glimmered quietly, standing watch, patient as dawn and twice as sure, until men forgot fear and stories dimmed. But not yet, for now the realm remembered and moved. Across passes and marsh and breaker-white waves, the song of ice and fire rode on dragon wings and the tread of a wolf-cloaked man, forging age where dawn owed debt to courage, and courage dared collect. The wind over the narrow sea tasted of brine and old fire as Drogon swept low, beating water into white fury beneath his enormous wings. Jon Snow clung to the spines behind Daenerys, his wolfskin cloak snapping like a pennon with every downward stroke. Below, 3 longships pitched and rolled under ragged black sails. Mel lay the Wren's laughing gull, Wyman Manderley's barrel-bellied sea otter, and the captured Myrish galley rechristened Snow's Bane. Their oars rose and fell in grim harmony, sending the combined host of Dawnwatch and Daenerys's unsullied surging south toward the stepstones. Spray glittered across Drogon's obsidian scales, steaming whenever it touched the heat that radiated from the dragon's skin. Ahead, the chain of half-drowned islands clawed at the eastern horizon. Jagged, slate-blue slivers littered with shipwreck ribs and bleached stone towers. Once the stepstones had been corsair nests and Sellsword vaults. Now a sheet of hoarfrost glazed their beaches, even under a sun that hung hard and bright in a cloudless sky. From the air, Jon saw spires of scabrous ice-piercing shattered keeps like crystal stakes, and upon the broken parapets shapes moved, too pale, too measured to be the living. Drogon banked. Far below, the fleet answered Daenerys' signal. Bronze horns braid, banners unfurled crimson and ivory, and smaller dragons, regal green and regal Viserion pale gold, glided after their larger brother. They spiraled as outriders, scorching hidden shoals with thin tongues of flame to flush any lurking sea whites. A horn sounded from the laughing gull, 1 long note, then 2. Jon squinted. A shape rose between waves like a breaching whale, but its flesh was mottled iron gray, its back a reef of splintered spars and rotted rigging. A drowned warship, reanimated, its hull packed with blue-eyed corpses working shattered oars. From ruined forecastle jutted bones of its figurehead, now crowned by a jagged ice helm. It plowed toward the sea otter, wake of corpse-frothed foam rolling off barnacled flanks. "Hold fast," Daenerys murmured. Drogon's pupils narrowed to slits. Fire growled in his chest. With a scream that rattled Jon's teeth, the dragon plunged. Orange flame erupted from his maw, washing over the undead vessel in a searing torrent. Deck timbers burst, rigging blackened, but where living ships might founder, the corpse ship kept coming, boards fusing into black glass before shattering. Dozens of whites staggered, ablaze, yet neither smoke nor salt extinguished their purpose. John drew Dawnbreaker, its ruby filaments pulsing. The blade drank daylight, casting a thin blood-red beam skyward. He could almost feel the sword tug toward the enemy, as though it were a compass drawn to true north even here amid southern seas. When Drogon climbed to avoid a javelin of frozen brine hurled from below, Jon shouted into driving wind. Viserion, regal, the younger dragons wheeled, joined by shrieks of newborn eagerness. They dove together, a spiral of emerald and gold flame twining into a single braid that struck the corpse ship amidships. Planks exploded, sending whites cartwheeling into boiling water. Steam rose in sheets. A moment later, the gunwale sagged inward, snapped, and the reanimated hulk collapsed upon itself, unholy light guttering from drowned portholes as it slid into the depths. On the snow's bane, unsullied archers loosed shafts of dragonglass into bobbing heads. Where arrowheads struck, each corpse collapsed, flesh leaching color until it dissolved to greasy foam. Tormund Giantsbane, his red beard bound by a sealskin thong, roared approval from the Ephosicily. He pointed at the nearest island, where glacial rime coated a crumbling watchtower. There's our bloody warren. Row, you craven pricks, row. Oars dug, sails caught favorable gusts summoned by Daenerys's dragons, and the fleet threaded a narrow channel of jagged rocks. Corpses floated face down, bumping hulls. More drifted beneath clear water, their parchment skin pressed against transoms like pale eels. Twice Samwell spotted patches where seaweed glowed faint sapphire. Residue, he warned, of necromantic miasma. Whites might rise whole from such stew with a single breath of moonlight. Fireships doused those slicks with naphtha and set them alight. At dusk, the host landed on a stony crescent beach beneath the watchtower. Pale snow-dusted sand, crust crunching under boots. Sparks of unnatural chill hung in dusk air, flashing like faint fireflies that drew heat from lantern glass. Jon marshaled ranks. Unsullied phalanxes armored in gray, free folk spears, Vale knights bearing winged crests, Manderly crossbowmen in salt-stained wool. Through the gathering clouds, Drogon circled once more before banking west to torch a forest of petrified pines, rumored to hide a second necrofleet. Tents were pitched behind a rough palisade of driftwood hauled from shore. Fires burned smokeless. Runsider's mirror boxes amplified heat, reflecting tongues of warm light across shelters. Sam gulped mulled wine near Jon's command brazier. "Whites of the sea," he muttered, wrapping gloved fingers around iron cup. Maesters wrote such tales in the Jade Compendium, ships helmed by drowned sorcerers from the Shadow Seas. But none lived to prove it until now. He shuddered. Whatever commands them must dwell deeper than Night King's throne. We cut branches, but root still thirsts. Jon nodded. We end it tonight. He tapped Dawnbreaker's pommel. Root answers to flame. Daenerys approached, white cloak swirling, snowflakes hissing to vapor where they touched her pauldrons heated by dragon-forged mail. Scouts returned, she said. Tower is hollow ruin, but beneath, catacombs run into island's heart. The Unsullied cleared first level, slick with frost, bones stacked like siege stones. Something deeper hums. Her violet gaze found Jon's. Dragons cannot follow underground. Some battles belong to men. Some, Jon agreed. But flame rides with me. He glanced at Sam, Styr, and Tormund. Choose 30. Lightest feet, hardest hearts. They armed with dragonglass daggers, pikes capped in obsidian fused by Vale smiths, and torches dipped in whale oil. Runsider strapped mirror disc to Jon's back to reflect Dawnbreaker's glow into tunnels. Grey Worm led 5 unsullied shieldmen, faces expressionless behind bronze masks. Sansa had dispatched a handful of Vale Rangers, Stone Eagles. They called themselves to serve as rearguard. They filed beneath cracked archway of tower, descending spiral stairs thick with hoarfrost. The first passage slanted steeply, cut from bedrock veined with something white and luminous.
Samposed, palm brushing striations.
Dragon bone, he breathed, or ice hardened beyond any forge. Cracks spidered along each band, as though tremendous power had surged here recently, fracturing focus. John felt Dawnbreaker pulse in sympathy. At the base of stair, a cavern opened. Stalagmites of black ice rose like choir of twisted candles. Blue light flickered within, pulsing to some hidden heartbeat. Between spires shuffled whites, drowned corsairs with beards of seaweed, knights entombed in shell-encrusted mail, even half-rotted krakens twisted into mockery of men. Their eyes burned azure. They turned silently as intruders advanced. Grey worm barked Valyrian, unsullied shields locked. Free folk spears darted overhead, dragonglass tips punching through salt-stiffened skulls.
Valja shares lozid.
John surged left, Dawnbreaker carving scarlet arc. Each stroke burst a white in cascade of shards and brine. Tormund wielded whalebone club, shattering ribcages. Sam, trembling, plunged obsidian dirk into a sailor's eye, gagging at the reek of centuries stale brine. Yet for every corpse felled, two more lurched from deeper dark. A sailor white toppled onto John, hands like kelp-webbed claws. Heat from Dawnbreaker seared its flesh to steam. John kicked free, swinging blade in restive circle until corridor lay glistening with melting limbs. Deeper they pressed. The hum grew louder, rattling teeth, vibrating torch flames into serpentine dance. At last they reached inner vault, a hexagonal chamber lined in mirrors of black glass, each pane inscribed with spirals and branching sigils similar to those carved on Dawnbreaker's hilt. In center rose basalt dais holding crystalline horn taller than a man. Icy mist wept from spiraled mouthpiece, drifting like slow smoke into dozens of thin channels etched into floor, feeding mirrored walls with blue fire. Before the horn knelt a figure in armor of fused coral and ice, turned, face covered by mask shaped like leering kraken, horns curving up like frozen foam. In its gauntlets it held a scepter wrought from ribs of some leviathan, crown of jagged icicles dripping hoarfrost. Eyes glowed incandescent. John knew this must be the Horned Lieutenant, the shadow glimpsed in glass candle visions, the architect of drowned fleets. Tormund spat. By all the goat tits and skagos, that's ugly. He hefted club. The lieutenant rose, moving like water inside armor. It drew no steel. Instead it struck scepter to basalt dais. Crack echoed like whale's bellow. Mirrors ignited blue. At once, walls turned liquid, disgorging whites by scores. They stepped from glass as though from water, each dripping frostfire. Cold slammed John, his breath crystallized midair. Dawnbreaker flared crimson, countering wave. He charged. Lieutenant swept scepter, conjuring hail of ice shards. John leapt, deflecting with blade. Shards vaporized upon contact. He closed, swung downward. Lieutenant intercepted with single gauntlet. Where Dawnbreaker met armor, red and blue sparks wrestled. Lieutenant flung John across floor. He slid on frozen runes. Unsullied formed phalanx around Sam, defending Scholar as he knelt to study etched channels. It's a focusing array, Sam shouted over din. The horn draws souls of drowned, feeds mirror gates. Break the pattern. Grey worm nodded, gestured. Spears hammered floor, cracking channels. Where obsidian struck, ice filaments flared white, then faltered. Mirrors flickered, spewing fewer whites. Lieutenant hissed, voice like waves receding over gravestones. It lunged at Sam, scepter raised. John forced aching limbs upright, dashed between. Dawnbreaker clashed. Scepter splintered, shards ricocheting. Lieutenant reeled but backhanded John with clawed gauntlet. Steel groaned, his breastplate dented. Pain blossomed deep. Tormund's club smashed Lieutenant's helm from behind. Coral cracked. Mask split, revealing face pale as moonstone but oddly human. Lips blackened, eyes seething. It shrieked. Frost radiated, flinging Tormund aside in spiral of shards.
Some shouted.
John, the horn. Pierce the heart runes. He pointed where spiral of sigils converged near mouthpiece. Jon rolled, grabbing broken scepter shaft. He hurled it like spear. Shaft pierced horn near spirals. A crack spidered. Blue light stuttered. Whirled back into horn. Overcharging crystal. Lieutenant screamed, tottering. Jon advanced, lifting Dawnbreaker two-handed. Lieutenant raised claw to ward. Jon drove sword through its chest, pinning it to horn. Crimson veins of blade pulsed into crystal. Horn's ice turned molten violet. Sound like hurricane howled from its depths. Mirrors shattered outward, their gates imploding, sucking whites back as mangled shadows. Wind roared, extinguishing torches, but Dawnbreaker's glow brightened. Horn split top to base. Shards blew across vault. Lieutenant convulsed, body splintering along red fractures. A ring of white energy burst from dais, flinging every man against walls. Jon held sword embedded until pulse subsided. Silence fell, first fragile, then absolute. Torch wicks reignited under mirrored glass dust. Floor channels sizzled, melting into harmless rivulets. Lieutenant lay in pieces, each chunk already steaming away into mist that smelled of brine and pine resin. Horn was gone, dais cracked. Tormund sat up, spitting blood. If that's Southern hospitality, I'll take the cold A. New York day. He grinned. You still breathing, Crow? Jon straightened, coughing. Enough to bury what's left of him. He wrenched Dawnbreaker free. Edge smoked but remained whole. He offered hand to Sam, helping Scholar stand. Sam's spectacles hung by bent arm. He wiped tears of cold smoke from cheeks. We'll need runes of warding, Sam murmured.
Seal vault forever.
Grey Worm nodded solemnly. They limped back through tunnels. With horn broken, cold retreated. Ice spires cracked. Ceilings shed flakes like thawing spring. On beach, unsullied scouts reported sea whites collapsing into foam. Undead ships drifting aimlessly until waves dashed them apart. Above cliffs, Drogon landed, wings stirring sandstorm. Daenerys slid down scale rough side, boots hitting shore. Jon met her, slumping until he felt her hands steady his shoulders. She scanned battered men, blood-dappled cloaks, Sam's torn sleeve, Tormund's cracked club. It's done? She asked. Jon nodded. Horn shattered, gateways closed. He looked up at dragons, their bellies glowing from recent flame. But seas still remember. We must watch every tide. Daenerys's gaze softened. Dawnwatch will patrol shores. My fleet will hunt any dead that drift. She touched Dawnbreaker's blade, winced at heat. Fire and ice indeed. Ships ferried wounded back to Sea Otter, while Manderley carpenters pulled blasted mirrors from surf to bury under stone cairns. Runsider's acolytes mapped runes, chiseling copies for Citadel study. Vale Rangers lit beacon atop Watchtower. Its flame cut fog visible clear to Blackwater Bay, warning and triumph both. That night Jon sat beneath shattered parapet beside Daenerys, watching Drogon and Ghost share uneasy silence by surf. Moon glazed waves silver. Fires along shore burned low. Free folk drummed victory until exhaustion claimed them. Daenerys traced spiral scar left on horn fragment she'd kept. A token. The world will always spin new darkness, she said. I thought conquering throne mattered most. Now I see kingdoms are frail as any ship against storms like these. Jon stared at moonlit water. Then we build better ships. He turned, brushing silver hair from her brow. And we teach our sons and daughters to sail them. She smiled, small and true. They sat shoulder to shoulder, listening to waves. By the turn of the next moon, the accord of dawn stretched further than any cartographer's parchment. Queen's Crown granaries bulged with grain from Vale valleys, while Dornish caravans hauled citrus and wine to White Harbor via Boneway to Kings Road convoys guarded by unsullied outriders. Riverland smiths forged dragonglass arrowheads by tens of thousands. Skagosi miners, pardoned, chipped obsidian under watchful eyes of night's torch. Maester Runsider's reflecting towers glittered along the wall, sweeping beams of concentrated sunlight each noon across frozen crest to keep old breaches sleeping. King's Landing, scarred still by Circe's wildfire and short of coin, could not challenge new order. Queen Daenerys's envoys negotiated truce with Storm's End. Dorne pledged fleet aid if Stepstones turned restless again. Across small folk taverns songs rose. When the red sword met the Sea King's horn, the dawn burned bright, and the cold was torn. Jon heard such songs when he strode Winterfell's market square months later. An autumn fair bustled around rebuilt statues. Free folk women peddling cloudberry mead, Manderley bakers frying eel pies, unsullied teaching children spear forms with wooden lances. Banners of dire wolf and dragon crossed over arched gate newly carved with runes of ward and welcome. Sansa approached, cheeks flushed from crisp wind. "Letters from Old Town," she said. "Citadel confirms horn shards inert. They offer to send archmesters for further study." Her eyes twinkled. "And they wish to see our wedding, whenever we choose to stop fighting wars and plan one." Jon's face warmed. Wars fade slower than plans, but perhaps spring. He looked toward Godswood boughs tinged gold. Spring seems right. Sansa squeezed his arm, left him to preparations for harvest moot. Jon wandered to parapet overlooking Wolfswood, ghost padded beside. Dawn sunlight caught Dawnbreaker's exposed ruby veins, sparkling red across stone. He recalled voices of ice and fire, promises bound in blood. He breathed crisp air absent of terror tinge. Yet far off, storm clouds stalked western sky. Lightning rippled within, purple and unnatural. Jon rested hand upon pommel, feeling sword hum, a quiet reminder that watch never truly ends. He stroked Ghost's fur. "Another ride soon, old friend," he whispered. The dire wolf nudged his palm, amber eyes unwavering. Jon straightened, listening to wind rustle banners. Behind him artisans hammered, children laughed. Dragons thundered overhead, chasing one another like playful wyverns. Ahead, world waited, storm by storm, dawn by dawn, as long as hearts dared stand between shadow and hearthfire. And so the wolf gazed into gathering dusk, the dragon into rising dawn, both pupils wide with guarded hope, ready.